Good evening, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Children and Young People's Overview and Scrutiny Committee, 29th September 2022. I've had apologies from absence from Victoria Aspin, from Councillors Griffin, Carr, Thorne and Thompson. Are there any other apologies? I beg your pardon. I'll say that again. Welcome to the Children and Young People's Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting on the 29th of September. I've had apologies from absence from Victoria Aspin, Councillors Griffin, Carr, Thorne and Thompson. Are there any more? Councillors, I'll revise that. Councillor Thorne is here. Any others? Any other apologies? Councillor Thompson's here. Yeah. Okay. Moving on then. I've had no matters which can be... can I sign the record of the meeting held on the 28th of July as being correct? Agreed? Agreed, thank you. I've had no matters which can be considered urgent. So the next thing I have to ask, are there any disclosable pecuniary interests or other significant interests and whipping? Mrs. Turpin. Councillor Turpin.
Thank you, Chair. It's just with regards to agenda items 6 and 7, really. I just want to advise that I've got a son with profound and multiple learning difficulties, so although it doesn't preclude me from sort of taking part in debate, I just wanted to sort of make that clear because it's quite important to the agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman. Yeah, I've also got a declaration of interest. Item 10, Rock is mentioned, which is part of Rivermead School, of which I am a governor, and the SEND strategy.
Yes.
It's
and
not
I'm
mentioned.
also a governor of Abbey Court School, which may well come up in the discussions as well. Any others? No. Okay, let's move on then to item 5, Complaints and Compliments Annual Report from the 1st of April 2021 to the 31st of March 2022. Sandy Weaver will introduce this report, so if you have anything to add to the report before opening up to debate.
Thank you.
Have you got anything to add?
Yeah, thanks.
Yes or no? Yes, if you...
Anything to add?
Anything to add to your report?
Or just to say that numbers of statutory complaints under the Children Act have fallen again, so there's a trend on that, and that the main theme about many complaints is poor or lack of communication, and that we've received some lovely compliments.
Okay, thank you. Right, members. Councillor Tranter.
Thank you, Chair. I was delaying, hoping I wouldn't leap in first. Thank you for a very helpful and clear report. I think that's good, and there are obviously a lot of good progress within it. I think that obviously needs to be said outright. Just, if I may, some very general comments. I noticed, one of the complaint types that was a little higher was lack of communication, and that seems to me an eminently... that sort of issue happens right across complex organisations and the council, and it's an area where I'd appreciate any comments of whether, how that particular aspect can be improved. I'd also like to have a sort of a general or moan about complaints generally, and I would hope that one day we will revisit our complaints process. It's something that I'm very passionate about because I think complaints are incredibly helpful to an organisation, and not all complaints are actually complaints. Some of them are someone trying to be helpful, trying to point out something's not works terribly well, that we could improve and listen to. And we should really welcome people contacting us. And some of the things that we do, like, you know, have this 10-day procedure. I know that's not the discussion for this evening, but I hope we can move away from that in due course, because sometimes a complaint can be dealt with in 10 minutes. Sometimes it might take 10 weeks, you know, who knows? It depends on the nature of it. But initial response needs to be quick. I just think we need a far more flexible approach to our complaint handling, and to treat them as a very practical and useful, positive way of learning how to improve our organisations, not just for the topics this evening, but actually right across the council. So that was just a general comment. I mean, obviously, if there's any response to that, that's fine. But I'd just be interested to know about issues of communications with our service users and customers, whether there are areas we need to improve in that area. Thank you.
In terms of a complaints procedure, it is a statutory process. So it's based on the regulations of the Children Act, and they were developed in 2006. So unfortunately, the timescales are statutory. However, I do agree with you that sometimes complaints are complex, and going over would be not a serious event because we've done it properly. However, we have tried to be flexible, and you'll have read there's a second process, a non-statutory one. And the purpose of that really is to include the people who excluded in the statutory process. So, for instance, a parent without parental responsibility can be refused to make a complaint, whereas they may be very involved with the child. So that captures that other process, also gives the opportunity for people to express their concerns. Grandparents is another one, and they can't make a complaint in the statutory process, but we can respond in the what I would call concerns. So I think we're trying to do that by introducing another process. They'll have the right to go to the Ombudsman, so they're actually getting more justice, as the Ombudsman would say, than just using the statutory process. So at the moment we're using two. Unfortunately, they do all still have to come in as far as possible. It is good to answer, as you say, in a timely way. And if we can resolve a complaint in 24 hours, you don't take it as a complaint because it's been resolved. So that wouldn't be taken as a complaint, but they may want it to be taken as a complaint because it's been a delay in resolving it. So, you know, we are trying to be very flexible. I'm also reporting now on those concerns, so we can learn from them as well. I also think we learn from compliments, because they are often the opposite. You get one complaint, there was bad communication, they didn't get back to me, I didn't understand this, and then you get a compliment. Social worker was brilliant, she explained everything, she always got back to me. So you can really learn from those compliments of what our service users value and want, and good practice.
Chair, if I may come back briefly. Thank you very much. Sandy, I don't think anyone understands this better than you, and I respect that. And I do understand the statutory element of it. I think what I'm trying to communicate is, and I'm reassured to hear there is flexibility, but it's a cultural point I'm trying to make in the way that we deal with people, which I think is incredibly important and can deflect concerns that people have. And sometimes there's the formal procedure, but there's also that human understanding of a very anxious person that we're trying to feel at the end of this process feels, okay, I understand better now, or something has been resolved, or whatever the outcome might be. And I think that's a cultural point.
And I think that culture is there now, because when I first started this job, you know, there was very little phoning the person up to ask. They just sent a response. Now the managers are really, really good at having meetings, at speaking to people, at resolving those issues before they even come near us. And I have to say, the work that some of those managers put in to the complaints in terms of trying to solve them and actually, as you say, reduce the anxieties, because you know, we walk into people's homes, they don't know the law or anything, and managers are really so much more, and using the language that their service users understand. I just, from what I've seen in 8 years, this is enormous change. I think Leanne wants to come in.
Thank you, Councillor. I totally agree around the culture. And I think it's fair to say that I have been accused of being a complaint nerd, because it's something that I really, really will not tolerate any slippage. If somebody's got a complaint, Sandy knows too well that I'm on it like a terrier. If anybody from the public, a parent, whatever, writes to me with a complaint, I will always answer that within 1 working day. I will acknowledge it. I can't get involved in necessarily solving it, but I will always acknowledge that parent, that I've received it, that we will look at it, because I absolutely agree. We need to be respectful. We need to get it resolved, whatever it is. Could be a total misunderstanding, or there may be virtue in the complaint. We need to resolve that as quickly as possible. And I think you'll see the timescales that Sandy's alluded to are very good. You know, we've got pretty much 100% completion rate in children's now, and that's the way it's going to stay.
Joanne.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for such a comprehensive report. I have to say, I really like the compliments, especially from the head teachers, you know, praising our social workers, but also, you know, special guardians and foster carers. That's fantastic. So thank you for doing a robust job and presenting it and explaining it. So I appreciate that.
Of course, Clive.
Sorry, I wouldn't want to disappoint you, Barry.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandy, as always, for the report. The number of complaints fully upheld, partially upheld, is increasing. You know, sometimes there's a sort of, I think they call it regression to the mean. You know, so averages go up, they go down over the. But there does seem to be a bit of a trend of them being upheld increasing. I just wonder if you or officers generally had a sort of take on that. Thanks.
I can only surmise, but I think the reason is that managers are making an attempt, and far more attempts, to actually solve complaints before they come near us or concerns. Therefore, the ones that come to us are the ones that really feel we haven't solved it. Before, when it just came straight to us, didn't try to resolve it, they were complaints that could have been resolved by one phone call that weren't upheld. Maybe, as somebody said, a misunderstanding. But I genuinely think that is the reason why, that the ones that come through now are going to be more likely to be upheld, because they've been through a sort of process before, they're still dissatisfied, they're more likely to go to the Ombudsman because they're not going to be satisfied very easily. And we may have got something wrong, we try and resolve it, we try and rectify it, put it back in the position they were in, but it doesn't always happen, so they would be more likely to go to the Ombudsman. Also, we have limited some of those because we haven't taken the grannies and the other people into account. So that has limited the numbers we take, so the percentage of complaints is small, becomes higher and the numbers lower. It's just a sort of statistical, you know, if you've got 1 out of 10, you've got 10%, but if you've got 1 out of 100, you know, it's only 1%. Managers are really, and social workers, trying to listen, communicate, resolve, and I think then it's a sort of last resort coming to us. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
It does, yeah. Thank you very much.
Pat.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sandy, for your very comprehensive report. The compliments page is very long and very detailed, and you know it's very good to see all these compliments. I just have a couple of just quick questions. There seems to be lessons learned from some of these complaints. I'm thinking particularly about the two regarding the university students, which are old ones. March 2020 was this one. So I'm just wondering why it didn't come to the last meeting that we had, as you know, we didn't have this one. But secondly, the one about the special guardians and the connected carers. Now, at corporate parenting, we've been having discussions about SGOs and connected carers. And you know, sometimes they don't, or they didn't get what they thought that they were entitled to. So it seems as if this is another lessons learned, because although they didn't take the compensation until 2021, at least they did take it. And I'm feeling that you know, we are promoting special guardians a lot because we want, you know, these people to be looking after our children. And, you know, connected carers also. So it seems that these particular cases, we have learnt lessons about what went wrong and how we can improve the situation. So hopefully that will continue.
Do you want to respond? I think it has improved. I think special guardians and connected carers, it's a very difficult position to them. They're being assessed, usually during court proceedings. They're not party to court proceedings, or very seldom are, so they don't know what's going on in court. They don't know what the outcome's going to be. And then when it comes to the end, when the judge, you know, it's clear that a care order is going to be given, or supervision order, it's all a bit of a rush then, and it wasn't sometimes communicated what they would receive. I think Leanne can explain now too that there's been a change in the amounts they can receive. And I think a lot of the special guardians are much happier now about what financial support they're getting. But yes, at that period, because the children's process, the statutory process is so long. They'll go in stage 1, then there's stage 2, then there's stage 3. That can take a year before they can get to the Ombudsman, who then might make a slightly different recommendation or somewhere along the line. And at this particular case, it was only at the panel that they accepted the amount that would be offered, because what they were asking for was way off we would ever have given any special guardians. So it was sort of a compromise, and we paid some back for them. Yeah, but we haven't had any this year. So I can only assume it's going much better.
Liz.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was going to ask a similar question that Councillor Johnson asked regarding sort of the number of the trend of sort of upheld and partially upheld complaints. But I accept your response about the sort of how it's being dealt with earlier on, and I can see there is actually a reduction in complaints, so that I can see where that matches. And I just wanted to then I was looking at sort of 13.3 and just looking at some of the issues that seem to be sort of quite fundamental issues that people are complaining about, and just also looking at that and sort of lessons learned, because I appreciate, you know, people, we're human, we make mistakes, and it's about dealing with that and learning from that and sort of saying sorry. But I just wondered how it's sort of communicated within the teams, because it talks about sort of the lessons learned with the director, deputy director, heads of service. So how do they then sort of communicate that to the team? So not just the complaints, but also sort of compliments as well. Because I think it's really, you know, important that the wider team get to sort of know about these issues so that they can all learn from it.
From my point of view, we try. I'm going to be meeting with the heads of service and their managers. I send all the reports to the quality assurance team so that they can triangulate that with information coming from other areas. But yes, I think, and I run workshops I haven't done any this year, but I tend to get back to doing them. And it's at those workshops that the social workers come to. So it's the basic kind of things. Don't go out there without knowing the children's names, you know, because sometimes it's really at the basic level. I think there's still a huge room for improvement. And the Ombudsman have been leading on this, because if we got something wrong, they won't close the complaint until we've fulfilled all the actions they've asked us to do. So they may ask us to review some cases to make sure we're not making a mistake in all those cases. And then we have to return that to them, and they only close the case when the, what's the wording, Michelle, remedy satisfied. And I think this is something that we, and as organisation, need to work on more, is following up, because I can say you need to do this, it's a learning, but it's how we making sure that's happening and ticking the box that's happening. And it's something we are going to be looking at, who keeps a log of that and who makes sure it happens. There are ongoing issues in workshops that you just have to reiterate all the time, you know, good communication, but sometimes they're very specific things. It may need to be a new policy. One complaint I'm looking at the moment was about transporting a child to London, and she ran away, and there was for 10 minutes, but enough of a hoo-ha to actually be extremely concerned. Disabled child, physically disabled and vulnerable. So I'll be recommending we need a really clear statement that we have to risk assess if foster care is taking a child on her own up to London, and a child with very difficult behaviours. It wasn't surprising she took it in her head to push her wheelchair and go off. So then I would need to check on that. Yes, you've actually put that into practice, that we've got social workers can be at risk if they're transporting children on their own. So that's something I think we're not that good at that at the moment. At least I'm not that good at tracking that. But I think with Leanne, and I go to her management meetings, adult ones, and definitely we're meeting with the quality assurance team to track, because they work with the teams far more than I do. And I also welcome, I've been to some of the teams with the social workers, I've done some training for the disability team. So teams can ask that. Anything you want to add, Leanne?
Also, in terms of staff newsletters, the principal social worker will, if there's themes, may well highlight that in newsletters, you know, just to highlight to staff that they need to be doing something differently, or this has happened, make sure you look at your practice. But the Ofsted will look at complaints. They'll certainly be asking me how we've learnt from complaints. So when Sandy said about workshops and that, it's very, very important that we try. Sometimes because of staff turnover, those lessons may be lost, so we have to keep reinforcing, but it's an ongoing process.
Thank you. Yeah, I think sometimes it's with the compliments maybe that with a team can actually learn quite a bit from, because I think with the complaints, I would hope that they're sort of maybe sort of more one-off instance where someone's made a mistake, and that, you know, they perhaps wouldn't have, you know, it was a sort of moment of, you know, just looking at some of the examples, you think, hoping that's not something they do on a regular basis. But I think with a complaint, if a team sort of, you know, shared that information of, say, a social worker, for example, doing something particularly well, it can inspire others to think, oh, actually, yeah, I'll take that way of working and learn from that. So I think, you know, in particular, the compliments would be a good thing to share.
Is that it? Any others? Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sandy, for your report. Always a delight to hear you present your report in the way that you do. My only thing, as a word of caution, it's nice to hear that numbers are falling, but it's also good for us to investigate the reason why they're falling. Are they falling because people have decided not to bother with us anymore, or are they falling because we are improving in our services. But, my colleagues have already mentioned that already. So, Chair, I move that we note the annual complaints and compliments report.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Councillor Tranter, thank you. Is that agreed? Agreed, thank you. Okay, let's move on now to item 6, the Joint Special Educational Needs and Disabilities Strategy for 2022 through to 2025. Celia is going to introduce this report. We also have Sue Gibbons in attendance, so officers. She's not in attendance. Oh, okay. Sue Gibbons is not in attendance. So, officers, if you wish to add anything to the report before I open up to debate. Celia.
Thank you, if I may. So, yes, this is our revised joint local area SEND strategy. It outlines our 5 strategic ambitions, priorities for the next 3 years. It is in draft at the moment because it has been out to consultation. That consultation closed on the 23rd of this month, which is why you don't have the final one in your papers. But if I can just give you an update on the consultation and the outcomes of the consultation to inform your discussions tonight. So we had 120 responses to the consultation and over 280 individual comments in relation to that. The majority of the comments were more about the how do we deliver on those priorities, and gave lots of helpful insight into what will be the action plan moving forward. Of the individual ambitions, so there were specific questions asked about agreement with the individual ambitions, and for all of them there was an over 85% agreement on those ambitions. Of the comments that came through, the kind of key themes, if you like, so there were 3 key themes that came through from the feedback. One, won't be surprising given the conversation we've just had, was for more regular, effective and meaningful communication between agencies and parents and carers. The second was to ensure that the voice of the child and the young person, parent and carer is heard and responded to in a meaningful way. And the third one was to streamline processes to ensure that pathways are easier to access and navigate. So we've taken those themes and we are in the process of finalising the strategy to include those aspects.
Thank you, Celia. Members. Wendy.
Thank you, Chair. And please forgive me, I think it's a good report and I think there's a lot in it that's very positive. But it's the same old record with me all the time. I read about transition and that, now I think that that's extremely important, and I have said it at the adult services. I would like children's services to have some more input into it, because we are taking them at a certain age and putting them to an adult service, and then it doesn't seem to be a pathway. I was hoping there might have been something in this paper about that. As I say, I know I do tend to go on about the same thing, and you've got so many positive things in there. I'm sorry to pick up a negative, but I do think transition is very important. Until we get that right, we are failing our children. And the other thing I wanted to say, speech and therapists, are they still very difficult to get hold of? Yeah, so that could have been in the workforce thing, but it wasn't, was it? But yeah. I mean, they've always been like gold dust, and I assume they still are. Yeah, which is sad, because that's another important thing for our children, isn't it? So they're just comments, really.
Thank you, Wendy. Celia.
Yes, thank you for those comments, and we absolutely agree the importance of transition, and it is figuring in our planning, but we will look at the strategy and make sure it's absolutely clear in there. It is a priority for us, and work has already started with both children and adult social care in our SEND teams to make sure that there's much more join up and forward thinking in terms of the transition. In respect of speech and language therapists, yes, that we are having a national shortage like everyone else, and reviewing how we tackle that.
Pat.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report, which I read avidly because of my governorship of school, with autism, which is the most that we see in special needs. I can't see anything in here about the fact that when parents nominate a school, that they can go over their PAN number, which is what has been happening, and especially to us. And the fact that sometimes the school just cannot take any more children and young people, even though the school has been named. So I can't see anything actually written here about that particular instance. And I must say also that I want to praise the Parents and Carers Forum. They have been highlighted here in this document. Myself and Councillor Turpin, we were at the Medway Parents and Carers Forum conference 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I must say that they are extremely knowledgeable and extremely working hard. But I did have the unfortunate, well, not unfortunate, but quite surprising that some of the people who were there did not actually know about this strategy and how to reply to it. So I know that the Parents and Carers Forum do send out, and you know, they do have a lot of communication. But to find out that some people didn't actually know that this strategy had been going ahead was quite difficult for me to take in. But all in all, I think that this is it's a good strategy. I note what the Health and Wellbeing Board said about deliverability, if there is such a word. So if that could be explained, because if it's not delivered, how are we going to do it? And what are we going to do about our children with SEND? Because if we can't deliver this, where are we going to be?
Celia.
Thank you. So in terms of capacity of school places, etc., so this is the high-level ambitions, and that is captured under access to the right support, right time and right place. And there is a significant amount of work going on around sufficiency, because that's the pressure on our special schools and having the right places. So that work is being considered, and it's being considered as part of the safety valve work as well, where we are in the process of pulling capital bids together to increase our estate for that. In terms of the Medway Parents and Carers Forum, they have absolutely been very involved and had a lot of input into this. So I'm sad to hear that some don't know about it, but we will take that back and push comms out again. Certainly when the final strategy comes out, we will do quite a big launch and across social media as well. Your final point about deliverability, not wanting to jump ahead, but unfortunately we're unable to share that plan with you. But when we can share the plan, the kind of next layer, which is about how we do it, which is absolutely a really important question, we'll come here and we can talk that through with you.
Okay. Joanne.
Thank you, Chair. I try to make my cup half full rather than half empty, and I do believe that support's an intervention. It's not a lifestyle choice. But when you call the strategy All Children Achieving Their Potential in Education, and yet we have an outstanding school, Abbey Court School, where the further education children are attending every other day, and that's been allowed, when actually if that was taking place at the grammar school, people would be up in arms. So we either, actively treat children as they should be treated equally, whatever diversity, whatever SEND issue they've got, or not, because we're supposed to be child-friendly Medway. I think it's a disgrace that our most complex needs children are only welcome in tertiary education every other day when we're presented with a strategy like this. Thank you.
You can ask this one, Celia.
Thank you. Yes, obviously we are aware of the position in Abbey Court. It's not a case that there's an equity issue. The children in Abbey Court require a significantly higher level of support, and the school currently have staffing issues around specialist TAs, which we know is a national problem, but obviously in Abbey Court they are our most specialist staffing, so they are impacted. It's not what we want, and it's absolutely not what we want for our children. We are doing everything that we can. Abbey Court are sending school learning home for those children that are at home, and we are supporting with additional social care support for those children who need it at home. So they are getting that additional support in their homes at the moment. The school are working really hard to resolve that position, and you know, on a day-by-day basis, we are reviewing it with them to ensure that that happens.
Thank you, Celia. Did you want to come back, Joe?
Yeah, obviously 35 years in the education system, it's often my experience that sometimes the most challenging parents have the most complex needs and challenging children. So how are they supposed to access and help children at home? And, you know, it makes a mockery of inclusion. And actually, you know, grammar school parents would not tolerate this, and it's always the most vulnerable that suffer, and it's outrageous.
I don't know if I'm allowed, if I could talk to you after the meeting, Joe.
You're always allowed.
Thank you. Anybody else? I have Tristan next.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Apologies, I have a bit of a cold, so if I get croaky, I do apologise. So the first question I have is just around the fact that I know we're seeing this report now. There's a consultation that we're due to get a report to Cabinet in October, which presumably will... I'm slightly question the order of proceedings, because I'm seeing this document now. Presumably we're going to get a consultation response on this. And as I understand it, the situation with the government in terms of provision for the high needs block grant, there might also be some news on this coming shortly, as maybe potentially as well. So I was just wondering, is this document, given some of the situation is going to be changing potentially quite a lot in the next month or two, is it not worth this document maybe holding fire in some ways and waiting till we know what the situation with the high needs block grant is going to be, and maybe waiting and actually waiting to see what the consultation response was? Because it's all very well seeing this now, but I just wondered what the order was, why I'm seeing this now and not waiting until maybe later on. That's the first question. The second question is just around, and I appreciate you giving me a lot of numbers about the number of pupils in schools, etc. There has been a number of investigations conducted by independent journalists, however, on SEND and EHC with Medway. What I'm very interested to see, and what I would be interested to see going forward really, is not the number of students in schools that have SEND, it's the number of pupils from Medway. And this is the difference. There's quite a lot of SEND and EHC of people who don't live in Medway but are educated in Medway, and that is causing me a concern as an individual. And certainly going forward, I would like to have seen the numbers on people who are actually from Medway, because what I understand from some of the numbers I'm seeing is that Medway has amongst one of the highest numbers of EHC refusal. So we are 43.6% versus Nottinghamshire on 22, versus Kent on 25.3. So I want to know, why is it that we are rejecting so many applications? And because I know our numbers are high anyway. In addition to that, we are taking a significant number of people from other local authorities as well. So it seems to me that we're kind of... My question to you is this the fact that we are catering for people out of area, is this catered for in this report? Because if it's not, I don't understand why we're taking on so much, and yet our people apparently are might not be getting what they're deserved. So and going forward as well, the third question I have is just around sustainability. Clearly there might be some news coming forward, but going forward, how the budget aspect of this, I'm not seeing any figures in terms of how much this is going to cost over the next medium term. And I was wondering if you could give me some highlights about what percentage increases in budget will be required to sustain the increase in pupil numbers that we're expecting to be SEND. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So in terms of the timeline, the consultation ended last week, and both this and the high needs block recovery plan was supposed to go to Cabinet on the 18th of October. We unfortunately were pulled back into conversations with the DFE right at the end of last week, and so have had to go back to the table in quite sensitive discussions at the moment. So we're not able to discuss that plan in any more detail with you. Now, actually, the ambitions that have been developed by parents and carers and young people should not change as part of that process, because the high needs conversation is about how we do that, how we deliver them. It's not changing the ambition. It might change how we address some of these things, given budgets, etc. So in terms of our plan, we will make some amendments to this. They will not be big amendments. There'll be additions with some of the feedback that we've had from the consultation to strengthen them, but our intention isn't to change the ambitions for that. But we won't put certainly the high needs budget through Cabinet until it has been to this forum first. So we have removed that from the Cabinet in October until we've had that. Your second question about the number of EHCPs. So the number of EHCPs that are referenced in this document are the numbers of EHCPs that are maintained by Medway. So they are Medway children, as in living in Medway. They don't all go to Medway schools. The numbers of children with SENK are the numbers of children attending Medway schools, because that's the data we have. So some of those might be children from other authorities, but they are attending Medway schools. So that's the difference in that data. We currently have 4% of our pupil population in Medway with an EHCP. The national is 3.7%. So we do refuse a high number of requests to assess. One of the things that we really need to focus on, and is our priority, is about building parental confidence in the system, so that they recognise that they don't need an EHCP, because the number of the requests that we refuse are ones that have come from parents without any input from education providers or health. So we have an ordinarily available document that sets out what schools are not only legally required to do, but actually have collectively agreed to say this is the basic provision in all schools. A lot of children's needs can be met by that. So a lot of our work is about supporting parents making the right decisions, at what point they need to fight for an EHCP, and actually putting the resource into schools and providers so that support can be provided at point of need, rather than waiting for a diagnosis or waiting for a document to have that. And so your budget question, I will have to defer. You will get figures, you will get a detailed plan and a budget when we've got that signed off, or when we've got approval that we can bring that forward.
Okay. Clive.
Obviously, you've just be careful what I say, because I know these conversations are sensitive and I don't want to say. But is there a provisional, provisional time frame when we will know either way where we are with these conversations with DfE? Because I know I keep stretching this point every single time I have this meeting with the high needs block grant, but this is a £20 million deficit. So if things are moving, then that's helpful to know, and it will feed into our budget processes for next year. So. It'd just be helpful if there is a time frame at all.
The Minister themselves needs to sign that one off. So it's with the Minister. We're expecting that will happen by Christmas. We can't guarantee that, but we should know before then, indicative about what, if, those sorts of things. But the Minister themselves has to sign that off.
Clive.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Celia, for the strategy. I think in the past we've been afflicted rather by, no disrespect to officers past and present, reports that have come to us that have been sort of rather vague and aspirational. And I think this one I welcome, because I see it's being pretty solid and pretty workable. And I think that's really important. We, I think, have not had a clear strategy in Medway for SEND for some time. I think that became apparent to me when the Abbey Court parents were campaigning for the secondary provision. One of the outcomes of that, which was a campaign about their provision, but one of the outcomes was that across Medway we didn't really have a grip on the strategy, both across Medway and through time. So I think it's really positive that we have got that. A couple of issues that I'd raise. One of the themes I think throughout the strategy is the idea about communicating as equals. Given, I'm on record in all sorts of forums for saying that I think parents are at a disadvantage in the system. a system that includes local authorities, professional officers, schools as professionals, the DFE, parents often, and I'm thinking of parents in individual families, are at a real disadvantage. So I can understand that communicating as equals where you have, you know, trans Medway bodies like the Parent Carers Forum, an excellent body, will do a really good job at contributing. But when it comes to individual families and parents, I've got a real worry about how that can be achieved. So I'd be interested to know what you might have to say about that. The other issue for me is about flexibility of the policy or the strategy. So flexibility for individual circumstances, flexibility when perhaps things go wrong, and you know whether that's taking. It's quite easy to set up a sort of line, a system, a channel where we think everything that should be smoothly followed. Life's not like that, of course, and I just wonder what flexibilities there may be, or what opportunities for flexibilities there may be in ensuring that the ultimate outcomes, which is the benefit for the young people, is achieved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So in response to the communication, absolutely, it's about enabling individual parents and individual families to be right at the core of what we're doing. And some of the things that we're looking at in terms of our strategy are things like introducing family liaison officers, having drop-in sessions where families can come and talk to the human face and actually have that in-depth conversation about their case. So we're very conscious of that. It's a really good point, so if it's not really clear in the strategy, we'll take that away and actually see if we need to emphasise the wording. In terms of the flexibility, SEND, as you know, is a system that's governed by quite a lot of legislation and statute in terms of the code of practice. So there are things that we have to abide by, and then obviously we're then restricted by sufficiency, capacity of schools, a budget that we need to work within, so efficient use of public funds. And then underneath all of that, or on top of all of that, you've got parental choice and parental view. So it's a system that's set up almost to fail from the start, isn't it? Because you've got all of those factors that need to be considered and worked through. So part of our strategy about putting that absolutely individual communication in with families is that we can start to support have those conversations and actually make it really clear to families, even if they can't get exactly what they want, why they can't, and what legislation we're working to support that. We are looking at making our own systems and processes more efficient and effective in terms of having turnaround times, etc. So hopefully that will improve parents' confidence in the system and the flexibility with which we respond.
Okay. Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. On page 53, I note that you have put here what parents, carers, children and young people have told us. And then bullet points here. Children with SEND have the opportunity to have their needs catered for in a mainstream setting. I feel that should be, where appropriate, should be added to that. The other few are improved pathways for diagnosis, stop making it so complicated. Children to have access to emotional and well-being help support more easily and quicker. Early identification and key in getting services and support in place for my child. All young people should be able to find placement locally. Well, I have a retail outlet in Gillingham, and I've noted this young boy coming past the shop before his school age. I would have clearly identified him as having quite a serious problem with keeping up with the normal education, and he's been at a regular school, And I believe since there has been an identification that he has got a problem. Now, although the school has the special education area for them, or the appropriate, but not really appropriate for his specific needs. And he's now, I think probably in the sort of, certainly well into the second, perhaps the third year of the primary school. And it's since been identified that he does need tuition at a different school, which I believe is in Walderslade. However, this was identified before the end of the last term, and the provision still hasn't been provided. And I sort of feel a day is a serious encumbrance for the young man or young boy. But you know, when it goes on for weeks, months, I just feel it's totally inappropriate. And you know, this comments you made here, what children and adults, young people have told us, it doesn't seem you're sort of perhaps acting on it. But that's all I have to say, really. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and it is absolutely the priority that children go to them most appropriate provision. So whilst the majority of needs can be catered for in mainstream, some can't. I refer you back to the previous comments about sufficiency though. So at the moment we don't have enough spaces in our special schools for the young people that we need to put in there. So unfortunately we do have a small number that mainstream schools are doing a fantastic job of looking after, but their plan does say special school. And the reason, well, there are a number of reasons for that. Some of the reasons for that is we have some children in special schools who can be catered for in mainstream schools and in resource provisions. So what we have to do is we have to rebalance the system. Because we've got this higher number of EHCPs and we've got increased demand, and what is effectively a lack of confidence in our mainstream estate at the moment to meet the needs, not across all schools, but across a number. So with the number of children we have in our mainstreams with EHCP is significantly lower than national across all of our ages. So that pushes the pressure onto our selective system, our special school system, and then we don't have capacity to put the children that need to be in there. So one of the things that we need to do is to redress that, and that's why there's a lot of support going into schools to keep the right children in mainstream and then the right ones in special.
Elizabeth.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks very much for this report. I just want to sort of pick up on the concerns that Councillor Howcroft-Scott raised with regards to sort of further education provision. So I think obviously it's important to note that sort of children in these provisions don't particularly have the choice in setting, like another child in further education who a young person could be sort of unsatisfied with that particular school and decide to move, and there's likely to be flexibility to do that. Obviously the children in these settings don't have that flexibility, so I'm just wondering sort of, you know, not to labour the point of, because we've discussed that, but sort of what other areas are there workforce issues and concerns that sort of need to be addressed to sort of ensure that we meet our ambitions with in this strategy. So I'm just sort of a bit concerned that the area with the workforce issue there seemed to sort of just occur very quick, well not quickly, I'm sure it was, I think the parents weren't informed about it and it seemed to be a very late minute decision. So I just sort of want to know that we are looking at this problem occurring and sort of being able to address it in a timely manner rather than it suddenly being an issue and a sort of panic mode.
Thank you. And you're referencing the Abbey Court situation. Is that the reference there? So again, in our sufficiency planning, so we've done some really robust forecasting about numbers coming through. I can also tell you that we've just commissioned an independent provider to do a review of all of our post-16 provision across Medway, not just for children with SEND, but for all children, to look at the curriculum pathways that we have available, where we have gaps, and how they fit in with the progression routes in terms of post-18, post-19 moving forward. So that review is going to take place and will come through in January, February with an outcome so that we can start to proactively look at our pathways. In terms of staffing, so the Medway Education Partnership Group look at sort of priorities across Medway, and one of those things is staffing shortages and how we might work together to address that. Obviously, it is a national issue, but there are things that we can look at in terms of how we grow our own, work with training providers to do that. So we are doing that. We are proactively looking at how we fix those.
Thank you. And yeah, and although I was sort of referencing the situation there at Abbey Court, it's just not just there, just across the board, anything that sort of would fit within this strategy of workforce issues. Because I know, like, sort of, for instance, social workers has always been a concern, and trying to recruit. So just any sort of form of workforce where there could be, where we start to see a decline in numbers coming through, that we sort of try and address that early, rather than until it becomes a sort of crisis point.
Anybody else? Oh, Habib.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the strategy. I think it's a very good document, actually. My question relates to page 61, where we're talking about achieving the best outcomes through inclusion and participation. Now, this is in relation to third-party organizations that provide some service for our young people with special education needs, maybe perhaps play group. And I just want to solicit your opinion from a membership notice I saw, which states the membership does not allow access to stay and play or SEND session or any special session or events. These sections are separate from membership and are chargeable. In relation to discrimination, I wonder how you would view an organization like that locally providing a service, and whether you think there's scope to educate or inform some of these organizations that may not realize that such signage is discriminatory from a parent who come in to visit a facility with their young child who has special needs.
Thank you. I'm not sure what facility you were talking about. Was it a nursery, did you say?
No, it's not a nursery. It's a facility next door where kids go to play. For example, you will find mentioning the name. But it's a business where young people go and have a play around.
And absolutely, this is a joint strategy. It's joint between the council and health, but also our education partners and providers. And it is about the culture. It's about the culture in Medway, and certainly this doesn't sit on its own, this SEND strategy. So obviously it fits in with child-friendly Medway and all of the stakeholder groups and the partnership boards that we have with that, which is really about the messaging in terms of inclusion and how we build inclusive communities. So I don't know the bit that you're talking about specifically, but absolutely that's very clear messaging from the council that this is a joint effort. It's about a culture of inclusion.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I'm very satisfied with that response. I will take it offline with you so you can probably contact the organization and share that message with them.
Anybody else? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, one of the things, it's a very good report, and obviously the forum has had a big hand in that. But one of the things that is of concern, and it was highlighted at our event that we had a couple of weeks ago, is the lack of sort of after-school clubs and short breaks for our youngsters. We did, in the early years of the forum, there was some excellent choice. There was a real choice of how our youngsters could access different things. One of the comments that was made to me at the event was we're trying to include more of, have more inclusion, but the problem with some of our youngsters is they can't be put in an inclusive situation. Some need to have a specialist provision. The only thing that's available seems to be ROC, which is £150 per child per day, which if you're only getting £750 a year, means you only get some support for 5 days. So I think as part of the strategy, we need to be looking at a bigger selection of short breaks and giving them the choice that youngsters who go to your normal excellent sports things during the summer holiday can have that support, or have something specifically that they feel safe and secure in.
Thank you. Those are very good points, and we'll note those and include them. It is clear, certainly following the pandemic, that a number of the after-school and out-of-hours provisions haven't come back online or haven't survived financially, etc. around that. So it's a really good point, and we'll take that away. Thank you.
Okay.
Chair, could I come back on that? I will take that back to Rivermead.
Yeah, okay.
Very quickly, I'm just thinking, what happened to Parklands? And I mean, we used to have Parklands, we used to have Alt-Even. I don't see them being, well, Alt-Even's not there anymore, so it can't be used. But Parklands is still around, and how much do we use that now?
Thank you, Councillor Purdy. Parklands is indeed still around, just achieved a, I can't use the word because it's embargoed, but achieved something significant when Ofsted came to visit recently. We're at a platform level now. Ofsted's given us what we need to, and you'll see something launching, but it's all embargoed at the moment, but it's certainly around. Well, I'll speak to you offline. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that'd be best. Yeah. Anybody else? Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Celia, for your report. Really encouraging. In line with what Councillor Osborne's earlier question regarding the announcement that's about to happen and Cabinet involvement, and I'd like your response with regards to aspects of the strategy being updated. My question really would be, would we be able to see those changes before they actually put through? Would we have the opportunity to scrutinize those? I know it's not your ambition that you're going to change, but the process or processes involved.
Yes, absolutely. We can arrange that, whether it's at a meeting or virtually, and then you send back questions, however that works.
Okay. Would you let us know how you would dispatch that?
Well, we will be in a position probably towards the end of next week to have something that can go out. So if you want it to go out virtually, and then people can send back any further questions, any amends. Yeah. Does that work?
Yep.
Yeah, that'll be lovely. Thank you. So, Chair, I move that we note the draft joint send strategy 2022 and to 2025 as set out in Appendix 1. Also to note that the strategy will be updated following the completion of the Safety Valve Intervention Program, SVIP, and the outcome of formal consultation. Also to add that any amendments to do with the upcoming announcement will be notified to this committee as well.
Is that seconded? Councillor Turpin. Okay, well, thank you, Celia, for that report. We now move on to item 7, the update on the Safety Valve Intervention Programme, which has just been mentioned by the Vice Chair. A request was made by officers for deferral of this item, as the Council is still in the phase of negotiation with the Department for Education on the safety valve funding. As a result, the figures presented in the published report may be impacted and likely to change. So following careful consideration by me, the Vice Chair and the opposition spokes, I'm proposing that this item be deferred to a future meeting to allow for details to be finalised and accurate information to be presented to the committee for discussion. Is that agreed? Agreed? Right. Thank you. Moving on then to item 8, the workforce recruitment and retention. Sam Beck-Farley will introduce this report. So officers, is there anything you wish to add to the report before I open that for debate?
Yes, please, Chair. This paper follows a data workshop which took place on the 10th of August, and it's to provide an update on the recruitment and retention challenges that we're facing here at Medway, as well as the surrounding areas and nationally. We note that there's a shortage of experienced social workers nationally and regionally, but we strive locally to continue to grow our own and retain the staff that we have. Along with the exit data, we've recently completed a survey which has spanned over the last 3 months, doing a deep dive into the things that are affecting people within Medway and what might be affecting our recruitment and retention. The 3 areas that have been highlighted are pay, workload and career progression opportunities. We've reviewed our workforce strategy and we've got in place quite an ambitious action plan that continues to address all of the concerns that have been highlighted against the national backdrop. Within the action plan, we're looking at things like workforce analysis, including skills maps, identifying potential and addressing capability. We're also looking at a career progression framework review, because we have one in that doesn't seem to be working, which will include a review of the induction, mandatory learning, as well as leadership training. Early talent pipelines continue to be worked on, and we work with universities, colleges, and also we review our apprenticeship pathway to ensure that we've got early talent coming into the organisation. We've also enhanced our recruitment campaigns, which also look at attraction through The Guardian, as well as a refreshed website. And we continue staff engagement efforts, which include a deep dive into sickness and things that are focused on wellbeing. As well as that, we're also benchmarking pay and other benefits. As of the 31st of August, our social work unfilled posts remain at 33, which is critical. So to address this pressure, we've introduced a bank team, and we're working on further solutions to make sure we're competitive within the market. As well as with other local authorities, we're taking further steps to make sure our staff feel equally valued. We've moved our temporary recruitment team back in-house, and we're commissioning a new dynamic purchasing system, which means we can work with a wider range of agencies, so we have greater reach within the market. And we've also put additional HR resource in to support the action plan. This continues to move at pace to address the national challenges we face, and also to retain our current workforce and build our talent pipeline. Committee are asked to note the national pressures that we're working amongst, but also to note the continuing priorities we focus within the service. Thank you.
Members. Laura.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Samantha, for the report. I'm not sure if this is the place to ask it, but normally, well, in the past, we've had to recruit from international overseas. Can you tell me what the state of play is with regards to that recruitment? Are we still involved in recruiting from other countries, and what's happening in terms of retaining those that we have recruited from outside of the UK? What's the rate? Are they staying with us, or are they moving on as soon as they are settled, or what's happening? Just give me some idea with regards to that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had a successful campaign where we done international recruitment. Of those that came, 2 have left recently. Okay, so we still have quite a large quota in. But it was quite difficult, if I'm being honest with you, in terms of loneliness, cultural differences, and when we've got a workforce with such high churn, to be able to nurture and support people that need additional support in terms of settling in as well as the work remit has been quite challenging. It does come with risk as well, so in certain cases we've had to stand as guarantor for people to get access to property. So it is a consideration, but not something we're looking at with the stability of our workforce at this moment. So it was successful, but has been quite difficult to do.
Yeah,
So in terms of retention then, what would you say, how many percent, or what's the percentage of retention of those that have come from overseas in the last 3 to 5 years, would you say?
So we've got 80% retention.
Clive.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Samantha, for the report. This is, as we've had the opportunity to say before, including at the data workshop, this is absolutely crucial issue for the improvement journey that Medway Children's Social Care is on. Absolutely fundamental, and it is a worry, I think, probably for all of us to see that the situation after an initial improvement is deteriorating. I'm sure the pandemic didn't help with all of that. There's all sorts of complications involved. And I know, as officers have said, that we're very far from alone in being in this situation. Nevertheless, we are inadequate and we need to improve that. So it is absolutely crucial, this element. You say, Samantha, about there being a national context for it, which is absolutely right. And we've had the opportunity to talk here and in other forums about what I think is probably fair to say amounts to a failure of workforce planning over the last decade in all sorts of areas that impacts the public services. So doctors and nurses and all sorts of professions, but including social workers. I wonder what... I don't know there has been, but I wonder if you could just talk through what those national representations that have been made by Medway to national bodies, LGA, whoever, to reinforce the need that local authorities have for a decent supply of social workers. And that includes our local MPs. So we have 3 local MPs who are members of the ruling party at the moment, one of whom is government minister, albeit not in social care. What representations, what ways in which contacts have been made with them to ensure that they bring their own authority to bear on this issue, generally, but specifically for Medway. And final point, I think, probably would be that the memorandum of cooperation which you described, which seems quite an innovative piece of work amongst authorities, and I can see it having value. I wonder if you could just provide some sort of evaluation of how well that is working and the impact that it's having. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Several national bodies obviously are involved with this issue because you quite rightly say it's historically a workforce issue. It continues to be a workforce issue. It continues to be a significant issue in Medway. Absolutely correct when you state those things. The Association of DCSs, Director of Children's Services, are in constant communication with central government. So from that point of view, Medway is an active member, not only nationally but also in the South East. And my colleagues in the South East are no different to Medway. Everyone is struggling with social workers, permanent social workers. The issue you raised about our MPs, initially in terms of the children's improvement journey, they were absolutely on board with this issue. They understood. I must admit, recently, with other significant national turmoil, if you like, that has drifted away a bit. But certainly I do have contact with our MPs and they recognise that this is an issue for Medway. The Memorandum of Cooperation is a very useful tool. It does send a message to the interim market that we are all on the same page in the South East, that for those social workers who perhaps like to move from local authority to local authority for whatever reason, for their own benefit, for whatever, they will know that there is a memorandum of cooperation and we will only pay a certain hourly rate for that particular role. There has been breaches of that memorandum lately. I know of 2. And interestingly, it was with another local authority who was inadequate. They had severe staff shortages and needed to bring in a project team, which they're paid at a higher rate, those project teams, because they do a particular job. So twice, I think, that memorandum has been breached. To date, I haven't declared a breach. To date. And I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for those responses, which are really useful. I don't think any of us should be in any doubt, I'm sure we're not, about the importance of this. We've seen some real improvements, I think, and the monitoring visits have indicated some real improvements, plenty of work still to do. It would be, absolutely awful for that to be threatened, or for the ultimate progress that we all want Medway to make to be put at risk as a result of this issue. So we should be in no doubt about the importance. If I could just what I hope will be just a quick extra. I just wonder what I've described in my own mind as the excess cost. So if the establishment was as it should be and all the salaries were being paid, it would be A. The total cost, salary cost would be A. We're paying a lot more than that because of so many more agency staff. I just wonder what that excess, in addition to the establishment, is and whether it's likely to be affected by the right-sizing exercise that I know you're going through at the moment, whether that has any major impact. It might not have any major impact.
Well, certainly interim staff are more expensive in the short term, so hourly rate. So obviously you use the vacancy, so we have unfilled vacancies and it will be there on top, and that will change. It's very fluid, so I can't say to you it's costing us X. We could do that calculation at the end of a financial year, for example, and you would know then, but on a day-to-day basis or a weekly basis, it's difficult because it's so fluid.
Sam?
Yeah, just on the agency rate, just to put some context into this. So when we started with some of these figures back in April 2020, our agency rate figure was just under 40%. The lowest that we've been is around 19%, and we've now started to creep back up, so we're sitting at just 24%, so we're not as heavily reliant on agencies as we have. So we have made some inroads into that permanent workforce. It's just at the moment, I think, coming out of the pandemic, people have made quite some different lifestyle choices where they've changed careers, actually, but also the pool of the agencies and the backlog of work means that there's ample opportunity for people to go into the local market and receive that higher rate of pay, and that is really challenging for us at the moment. And then with those that were in the local market, they're now progressing onto the project teams and the bank teams, which again is a higher rate of pay. So we're forever kind of chasing that churn within the workforce, but we're not sitting at as high agency use as we was when we were in April 2020.
David.
Sorry, just to kind of add something to Councillor Johnston's question about the premium. So typically in finance, we kind of work on a premium of about 30%, so agency staff are about 30% more expensive than established staff. But that is quite maybe a dated working kind of principle, and we probably need to reflect it in light of the kind of memorandum of understanding and those kind of things, so, but broadly.
Thank you, David. Okay, Pat.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, we have this phrase, we are growing our own, or trying to. This is a serious situation, and, like Councillor Johnson, I was going to ask about, when we have our next Ofsted visit, what they're going to think of, the position that we're finding ourselves in. It is very difficult to retain social workers, as I understand it. But I was interested in 5.4. reference to the Children's Services currently has 3 social work apprentices. Children's Services are considering expanding this programme, considering the national shortages highlighted. Could that be explained a bit more, please? Because that seems as if it should be something that's quite interesting and might help. I know not fully social workers, but at least, you know, some young people or other people might decide that they want to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have an apprenticeship academy that's quite successful within Medway. One of the things we need to develop is an apprenticeship pathway for social care, and we want to expand on that this year. Now, part of this is also looking at our newly qualifieds that come in. So you'll note from the report that we've taken in more newly qualifieds this year. So all of this is looking at us growing our early talent pipeline so that we can maximise people coming through. Now, this does come at a slight cost to the service because there needs to be some mentoring and some support, and people coming in at that level obviously wouldn't occupy a full caseload. So we have put some additional provision in where we will overcompensate with some agency workers to provide that coaching. So this forms part of a bigger strategy around our early talent. So we want to increase those numbers through the pathway that we're developing.
Could I come back, Chair?
Yes, you may.
Maybe another one of my flippant comments, not really, but I have said this before. We are in a programme of extreme house building here. So is it not beyond everybody to sort of look at the new people who are coming in here, and especially in new build residents coming in? Would there be any possibility that we could do a programme of recruitment to these new housing providers so that something could happen there? You know, coming to Medway, are you a social worker or something like this? Because we are having lots and lots of new residents, so surely there must be someone amongst them that could possibly be what we're looking for.
That's all.
Yeah, absolutely. We're working with the Guardian at the moment to do a wider campaign, so there's no harm in us using that material and what we've got to absolutely tap into that. So I'll take that away. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Joanne.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, we want best value, and I know when Paul Startup left, we had an interim head of service for children and care leavers, and at Corporate and Parenting Board this week, we met our substantive. I just wondered how much or how cost effective it is having consultants to do pieces of work. You know, are there any ways we could save money by not having so many consultants, perhaps?
Thank you for the question. I think the individual that you're referring to was actually an interim head of service, not a consultant. We will use interims for those roles first. Very, very little work is done through consultancy because it's very expensive. And in my view, that funding needs to be addressing our social work shortage. And we need permanent social workers, we need permanent heads of service, and we now have a permanent leadership team in children's services, which is great. So very little consultancy work is done, although when we do need a job and done in terms of our improvement journey, if we haven't got the capacity in-house, we will sometimes use consultants, but very, very few.
So just to clarify, interims are cheaper than consultants, are they?
That's a difficult question. It depends what the job is, depends what level in the organisation you're at. Yeah, it's difficult to answer that.
Thank you, Joanne. Wendy.
Thank you, Chair. I think we ought to start by saying we have got some good social workers in Medway, and let's hope we'll hang on to them, and I'm sure we will. But my point would be, do we ever, well, we do mentor them in a way, but you're mentoring them with agency workers. Now, I'm only saying that because I see paperwork in front of me sometimes and I think, my goodness me, if someone had been overlooking them, they could have said all these things a lot shorter and a lot easier rather than, and because they're trying too hard, if you see what I mean, and giving us too much information that we don't really need. Now, we have experienced social workers. Can they not look at these sort of things? Because we're putting pressure on them. You know, they come in, they're new, they're doing a lot of work that they don't, and it's not for me to say because I've not really got any idea, but I read the paper and I think they didn't really need to do all this work. They could have done it. And that could take the pressure off of some of them, could it, or could it not? You tell me, Leanne, because as I say, I'm just an amateur.
You've hit the nail on the head, and social workers themselves will say to me, we want less bureaucracy and we want more time working with our families. There are statutory responsibilities. Being a social worker is a registered profession, so there are minimum standards that must be met. And I know Donna is working very hard with our recording system to try and get those forms shortened. And it's a tricky balance because while you may say there's too much information, I could have an Ofsted inspector say to me, there's not enough information. So it's a tricky balance, but you have hit the nail on the head. That is what social workers are saying. We want less bureaucracy and more time to work with the families.
As if there wasn't sufficient information, we're quite capable of saying, actually, we're not happy with this and we can't agree. Come back with more information. Right, yeah, I'm just trying to make everyone's life easier.
Thank you, Wendy. Stuart.
Thank you very much. I mean, this is obviously not a new problem, and I have confidence, and because we've discussed it many times before, that there are very few stones that haven't been turned over to try and find solutions, and I don't question that for 1 second. During my career, I've often had times when I've struggled to recruit specialist people, not in this field, but in other fields. And so I have been through this. One of the things, and of course that's, I mean, on a national basis, when you just, the people don't exist, they don't exist, and you do everything you can. You can't just push up wages because that's impossible. It's very limited. But one of the things I've always done, and I'd be interested to get your view on this, is to constantly review staff morale and some of those softer issues which retains people and keeps them there. I can tell you some of the things I've done over the years. I have done things that sound strange but were important to people at the time, changing parking arrangements. Once I installed a gym because IT specialists seemed to be very keen on that. It didn't cost me much relative to what we were saving at the time. I've adjusted working hours. There's, within the realms of that which we can do, how much are we in, do we feel confident we are really closely in touch with all of our teams, and those things that we can improve and change and adjust? Maybe, I mean, I know a while back we gave them new computers, things that make people feel better in some way or another. Do we know what they are? Are we doing everything we can within those things we can influence?
Yeah, thank you. And absolutely, sometimes the smallest things can make the biggest difference for people to stay. So, and we have a staff reference group, so we get the voice from the floor, and often those subjects come all the way up to the corporate management team level, particularly through our leadership board that we have. Along with that, we also have something called the Medway Makers, which is a wider voice across the organisation. So we look at whether this is common to just children's or if it's something that is a shared corporate responsibility. Now, some of the things that we've had to address is simple things like stationery, making sure there's enough stationery available. One of the bigger things was around the system and the use of the system and the inaccessibility around the forms, which obviously that's been taken forward and being dealt with as well. Smaller things, again, that we've had to address is flexible working, working from home. We've gone into a new way of working, so what does that mean for people and how do we manage that work-life balance when we came back into the office? That's been quite a big thing. Leadership and training, so we get feedback on leaders and then we work on the training for that. And the feedback actually for the leaders is really, really good and really positive, which is great to hear as well. So as well as some of the stuff we need to fix, it's sometimes nice to hear from the people to know what's working well and what we need to do more of. So we continue with great effort around the engagement. Along with the staff engagement forums, there's also conferences that are run. Something new that the team's put in that's up and running at the moment is a breakfast event to come along and meet the senior leadership team and have face-to-face conversations, an opportunity to ask questions. And that's really how we understand what people are feeling. At the moment, across Medway, we have a staff survey that's out that closes tomorrow. It's been out for a month, and that picks up on a number of activities, and that's gone across the whole of the organisation, and that's our big annual survey. And we'll be reporting on the results of that in about 6 weeks or so. So engagement and small things fixing is absolutely something that we continue to do, and we address it monthly.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm very encouraged by that, but do think creatively. Once I took the outrageous decision to get all the senior management team to park furthest away and all the customer-facing people have the nearest and the best car parking spaces. That made a huge difference, strangely enough, and cost nothing. So sometimes creative thinking, you know, but you're obviously doing that, and as I said, I'm not surprised. Every stone is being looked under at the moment. Thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you, Stuart. Councillor Van Dyke, I don't know your Christian name.
Yeah, thank you. On page 104, 9.2, talk about a targeted recruitment campaign with The Guardian, which will be going live in October 2022. Can I ask whether you're solely going through The Guardian or whether you're advertising posts more extensively in other areas of the press?
For this one, so The Guardian, we haven't used The Guardian for a period of time, so this is a new avenue that we're exploring at the moment. So we do use other avenues. We're constantly across social media. We do use Jobs Go Public. Previously, we'd been with Community Care, but our return rate was dwindling, so we've taken a new tack now to go back to The Guardian. And part of this wider catchment really is as a result of people being able to work at home more. So where we're finding people don't have to be in the office 5 days a week, there's greater choice in terms of working. So we do find a lot of our local people are more inclined to work on the boundaries of London where the pay is slightly greater. So we want to do our reach further out and sell the benefits of Medway as a place to live, work and learn.
Thank you.
Liz.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for this report. It's very important, as we sort of said earlier. We can have the best strategies and provisions going, but if we haven't got the workforce to deliver it, it's not much use. So I really sort of welcome sort of a deep dive look at this, and I just, on a similar theme to sort of Councillor Tranter with regards to sort of staff welfare, I was looking at sort of 7.1 and sickness rates, and I guess it's difficult to, over the past couple of years, to sort of analyse that because COVID will play a huge part in that, and I think you can sort of see that from sort of this time last year with the figures in that chart. But I noticed in 7.3 you make particular reference to the fact that the number of days lost in children's services compared to the whole council, and there's a big difference there. So I'm just sort of concerned by that and what you think, are the reasons for that. And I guess, when there are sort of workforce issues in a department and in a team, it is going to cause a lot of stress for those that are still there carrying out the roles and the jobs. So is that part of it? Are there other reasons? Is there something that we could do to address that if we know why? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So HR are doing a deep dive into all of the sickness. So we're looking at short-term sickness, long-term sickness, making sure that all of the policies, all of the support and help through occupational health and care first is being applied at the right time. And we're encouraging people around their well-being and making sure that there are flight paths back to work in the most suitable way rather than putting additional pressure on. Now, with the latest sickness, some of the stuff that we're noticing is it's mainly due to stress and depression. And given the activity that we've got within Children's at the moment, the churn of vacancies, so even though I mentioned the agency rate is lower and we've got more permanent staff in, we also have a lot of internal movements because people want to change career and they want to move on. So that churn within a workforce is quite difficult when it's such a pressurised environment to work in anyway. So ongoing work is happening around well-being. So how do we get to the point where we don't allow people to get in that situation where they're feeling stressed and they're feeling depressed about what they're doing. And we're currently working with public health on a programme that we want to roll out, which we haven't had before, and we would be piloting in Children's. So we're looking at preventative measures as well as helping those people come back. But most definitely, stress and depression coming out of COVID seems to be the main cause. Now, we do have that across other places within the council, but as you can see from the average days lost, this particular service is suffering slightly more.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think that for the month of August, staff have been carrying the vacancies. There is significant stress, and you know, I feel ever so proud of those staff for stepping in and trying to fill some of those gaps. And members must realise that children's services I cannot say, stop, we're not taking any more referrals, we're closing a ward, we're doing this, we're doing that. Every single referral that we accept must be allocated to a social worker. It can't go in a manager's name, it can't sit in my name, even though I'm a registered social worker. We have to allocate within a day. And, you know, if we have 100 children come through this week, we have to find social workers to allocate to. And that's why you see the caseloads going up and going down. And when we come to the council plan and performance, you'll see some of those red indicators showing the strain that the service has been under. So there's certainly stress amongst our workforce, and there's a lot of camaraderie. There really is, and staff have pulled together on behalf of Medway. We have a weekly drop-in session run by the principal social worker just to try and give staff an outlet, a valve, if they're getting stressed, overwhelmed, they don't feel that they can go to line management or whatever, for whatever reason, they have a once a week opportunity to get to the principal social worker. So it's a tricky to manage, and this, the workforce issue and the sufficiency issues, you know, finding placements for children are the two significant issues for Medway. They're the ones that keep me awake at night, and they're the ones that we have to crack if we are to move beyond inadequate.
Yeah, if I can just come in there, Leanne, it seems to me that it's a vicious circle. The more stress people are under, the more time they're taking off work, which then increases even more the stress. You know, because, you know, looking at this chart, we've got 5,000 working days per year, or in that sort of order, which is incredible. So good luck with your efforts. Do you have sort of return to work interviews and things? And is there a trend other than stress? Sam?
There is other factors, you know, so we do have people who have other illnesses whereby they're out, and it is about how we support them. Our return to work interviews are there to support the individual return to work in the best way possible. So we do things like a staggered return to work, which is part-time on medical grounds, so they're not fully back in with it. We'll also do occupational health referrals, so we get trained professionals to give us opinion on any reasonable adjustments that somebody might need in order to get them back to work in the safest way. And all of those, we rely on the professionals really to guide us on what would be appropriate. But it's a scattering of activity, I would say, across sickness, albeit stress being the highest.
Yeah. So do we have any sort of in-house counsellor at all in your departments?
Yeah, so we have mental health champions in-house. They are available for people at any given time. Yeah. The Medway makers make themselves available from an engagement point of view as well. And we have Care First, which is a 24-hour, 7 days a week service, which provides counselling online as well as face-to-face counselling should people need it.
And in spite of that, we've still got these figures. It's, oh, good luck, as I say. Anybody else? Any other member? Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sam, for an excellent report and obviously for taking the questions. For me, actually, I do like the idea of apprenticeship, growing hours through apprenticeships. I'm wondering, do we visit schools, especially from even Key Stage 4, just to get that idea into them, and from Key Stage 4 to Key Stage 5 as well, to get them motivated at such a stage?
I'm not going to say we visit all schools. I absolutely know that within the plan around that early talent pipeline, the principal social workers are very much engaged in that early talent. I don't know if Leanne or Celia will have any more details on schools in particular.
We do, Councillor. Social workers is the sort of profession that you need a lot of experience, a lot of life experience. So to take a young person straight from school and introduce them into that pathway can be done, but we usually it's usually more beneficial to that worker if they get involved in perhaps our family solutions early help sort of work, because it is quite difficult work, and it's I don't want to say it's not conducive to young people, because that's not what I mean, but the better social workers have a bit of life experience behind them. So we offer a broader range of experience, maybe the youth service, do some of those activities with young people, as I've said, family solutions, and then those people will get on the pathway and go through the social work training and become registered social workers. It usually works like that, because if you don't have enough life experience behind you, you can easily burn out because it is quite a load.
On people from university, straight from university. So those who have done A-levels and gone on to university to study social work, just wondering, just a thought. Yeah. All right, thank you. Chair, I move that the committee note the contents of the report.
Is that seconded? Councillor Tejan. Okay, moving now on to item 9, the Council Plan Performance Monitoring and Risk Register Review Quarter 1, 2022-23. You'll find on pages 107 through 136. And Leanne's going to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. If it's all right with the meeting, I will just go straight in and deal with children's social care, and I know the other officers here will deal with their particular sections because Donna Marriott is not able to be here this evening, so I'll pick that up. Average caseloads and assessment teams have deteriorated. They now show as red, and that is a direct impact of our lack of workforce and more referrals coming in than we have staff to manage, and we've just been debating that very topic. The same for ILAC 3, so we're not able to be as speedy as we should do because we have capacity issues, and also with ILAC number 4 measure. The percentage of audits grading as good and outstanding are still low, but they are on the up. They are absolutely on the up. And you'll see that this measure is too high for you to see at the moment, but there is improvement there, which I'm very pleased to report. And of course, N23, the percentage of children's social care substantive posts not filled by permanent social workers, we've just debated that. So that's it for children's social care. Do we want to do education next, and then James, please?
Thank you. So with education, we have a new red one, which is around permanently excluded children. This is caused by 8 permanent exclusions from secondary schools at the end of the last academic year, so in the last term. They were related to some serious incidents in those schools, and so have taken our figure above national, and we've always been significantly below national, so we've gone above national for that round. We are currently reviewing our alternative provision to give schools more support around a revolving door, not having to resort to permanent exclusions. But there were a couple of quite serious instances where the schools had no choice on those ones. We also remain in red for our persistent absence, and obviously we discussed this in detail at the last ONS, but just to say that this is the data from the published data from the autumn term, so terms 1 and 2 of 2021. And we have the next round of provisional data, which comes in October. So we've seen early sight of it. It's showing an improvement from the 25% to 23%, but obviously that hasn't been validated or cleaned yet. So that will come into your next report. But the task and finish group around persistent absence continues to work with those schools and is sharing strategies between them and policies, etc., on how they can intervene. You'll also see that we, for the first time in a couple of years, have some academic outcomes. Again, these are very provisional. They are unvalidated, so they haven't been checked or published as a final validated data. These ones are for Key Stage 2. So it shows you that the number of proportion of children, Medway children that achieved the at least expected standards in the combined reading, writing and maths measure at Key Stage 2 has dropped below the last official data that we had, which was 2019. So we've gone from 64 down to 56.2%. And if you remember, this Key Stage 2 test was carried out in exactly the same standard and conditions as pre-pandemic, because it's what nationally the government are using to measure the loss of learning. So you'll see that there has been a drop nationally as well from 65 to 58%. However, Medway's drop is bigger than national. Those are my 3 reds. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Members? Oh, James. Be my guest.
Thank you, Chair. Members. So the summary, I think, around the weight management targets is their annual measurement, so that's why they haven't changed, and we still are awaiting the information for 2022's data collection. So children in reception and Year 6 were weighed and measured, and we're awaiting that feedback from the Department for Health and Social Care. I anticipate that we will see a reduction in the overall prevalence of that will improve, because members will be aware that this issue about increasing weight was a challenge for everyone across the country, particularly related to the pandemic. But that all said, we should see an improvement, but I can't say anything more on that at this moment in time, Chair, because I'm still waiting for that information. A couple of interesting things around the breastfeeding initiation, and perhaps this is one for all members to note, but also to support us. So one of the quirks around this is the target is to ensure increase the number of babies that receive breast milk, whether expressed or directly from their mother when they are born. We had some challenges earlier on in the year, of course, because of COVID, and again that impacted on the ability for the midwives and other people to work with mothers that had given birth. But we have seen some significant improvements, at least in our programme. Members hopefully are aware of our Beside You programme. Is everyone aware of that? No, some members have got some data for us here. So we've we had a major conference at the Woodlands Academy on 6th of August, and from that we had 178 delegates. So these were people from lots of different organisations, as well as people who are involved, i.e. parents who are advocates and our peer support workers. It was a really good session. 116 attendees. 116, 65% of the delegates went into different workshops so they could actually understand more how they could improve and support people in our communities to breastfeed. We've got a lot of cards. Everyone seen our breastfeeding cards? No is the answer. Okay, so Julia, what we've got to do now, in your Pigeonhole members, we'll probably do this electronically. We're going to send you out a lot of resources because we've been doing quite a big push, not least because we want to go from this perspective of normalising breastfeeding as colleagues, members will be aware out in our communities, but actually advocating that as well. And I know Councillor Tranter, in your cafe, we have a monthly drop-in, don't we? So we're doing quite a lot out there in the community to try to stimulate and improve the uptake of that. A lot of work on our social media feeds as well, and hopefully members will be seeing some of that and some of our tweets going out. So in terms of that, that's where we are with the breastfeeding. The other target, which is around our under 18s and our weight management service there, that is a supply side issue. So what we need to do is to get more referrals from our community and particularly professionals into that service, because it's a great service. When young ones come through it, they do lose the weight, but we have been challenged in terms of getting those referral routes through, because this is more of a higher tiered support thing. Young ones have got to go through a process, and we just need to unblock that particular pathway. But that all said, it's good service. When they go through, they lose the weight, but we're just working now with our primary care colleagues to ensure that we get the flow through. That's my feedback, Chair.
Okay. Members. I've just got one issue in that case. It's a personal, or sort of a personal. You're talking about, you know, breast is best for feeding newborn babies, but you're almost saying bottle is bad. And there are some young ladies who, for whatever reason that I don't quite understand, can't breastfeed, and they are feeling. Sometimes they are feel as though they are being bullied, and they just cannot do it. You know, I mean, I don't understand these things. You possibly do, but it's a delicate balance. You must make sure that if women can't breastfeed, then they're not. They too will be supported.
I don't think I actually said anything against women who are not able to physically express milk and breastfeed, and you're quite right. Our programme is very sensitive to those unfortunate women who are in that position, and for whatever reason, because it could be, you know, it could be, as you already mentioned, it could be a medical condition, or it could be something else. So what we try to do is to work with mothers and families to ensure that they do the best in their context for that particular child. So we don't stigmatise, and we definitely do not victim blame anyone that is not able to breastfeed because of whatever the reason may be. What we try to do is to encourage everybody to accept that breastfeeding is normal for people. If they're out in a restaurant, they're out in a shop or wherever else, we create an environment so that those people who want to breastfeed are supported so to do that. But we very much hear what you're saying, and that isn't our programme at all, Councillor Kemp. We definitely don't stigmatise.
That's encouraging. Thank you. Liz.
Thank you. Yeah, just to keep on the same theme with breastfeeding, and just to come back on Councillor Kemp's point, I mean, I actually did a lot of volunteering with the peer supporters, and it is definitely not, although the role of the peer supporter is to try and increase breastfeeding rates, they do certainly support mums in all forms, and there's no point sort of going down a very sort of one route, because you're going to just maybe alienate mums. So just to sort of reassure you on that, I've seen it on the front line of what they do. But I just wanted to move on to that target, because it says about breastfeeding initiation. So is the target just based on the sort of first feeds at hospital? Is that how it's recorded?
Yes, so you've got initiation and continuation. So, and there are two slightly different, obviously, marks. Sorry, my computer went off. There are two different indicators that we measure. So this one's on the initiation, which is why when I linked it back to the issues with COVID and when babies are born in hospital and the teams around them, it was clearly more work needed to be done. But because of the context of infection control and things like that, it was more challenging. Staff sickness, clearly, and lots of things around that, as members will be aware. So that rate, obviously, we are where we are now with that particular quarter, but I do know that that has improved over the last quarter, so we have got better insight into that.
Yeah, just coming back on that, because I do often sort of ask questions relating to this, but I think we should focus on more the sort of continuation target rather than this initiation, because sometimes it is to do with what support mums get in the hospital, and that isn't always there, depending on, like you say, COVID was a big factor in that. Also, you know, the physical number of babies being born in a 24-hour period could be putting stresses on midwives and what support they can then give to new mums. So I'd be sort of more inclined to sort of focus on what support there is once the mum has gone home and over the coming weeks. It shouldn't be a case of, oh, the mum didn't breastfeed in the first 2 days in hospital, so that's it. You know, they should be supported into knowing that, okay, maybe you didn't then, but you can still pick this up and we can support you in doing that.
Very much so, and I think one of the challenges that we have is just ensuring that people know how much support we do put in place when people do leave that acute setting and do go home. Of course, as clearly, hopefully members are aware, we commission health visitors. They take over, don't they, from midwives in terms of that handover period, and we then encourage, and there are targets within our programme, let's say the commission service, to support mothers to continue to breastfeed. And you mentioned, you know, the range of other bits that are out there, but rather than me going into that detail, I'm more than happy to provide, outside of this meeting, an additional briefing on some of the programmes that we do have in place to support mothers and families, of course, because it's not just about the mother, it is that environment, and that's the important point that you're making there, Councillor Turpin, around how do we ensure that when people are out of that acute setting, that there is support and advice available for them to continue to breastfeed. And we've got quite a good infrastructure around that, but more than happy to provide a second report if members would find that of value around those services, Councillor King.
Okay. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a comment, really, from a primary school perspective about Medway Can. I think that the launch has been great, and actually there's lots of things that schools we're going to get out of it, such as, like, obviously refreshing the Daily Mile and classroom stars, and easy things that we can do that hopefully will redress the issues around the wait. Just wondered, as a committee, will we get feedback on the success of that, be it in, say, 6 months, 12 months' time?
Most definitely, and we are coming back from Australia, as you have put out the Medway Can plug. So as much as we can do to encourage our community to get engaged, get involved, and we will be providing evaluation and feedback on the programme.
Of course. Pat.
Yeah, can I change the subject? Okay, could I take you to page 129, please? This is reference to the NEETs information that we've got here. I was concerned to read reference about funding will soon end and leave a gap within provision available in Medway. And not knowns is still a high priority, and seeking methods to contact young people and record their data. And then I read, the young person tracking officers are working to correct the internal recording anomalies and correct the data held. That worries me, because are we saying then that the data that we've been receiving is not the correct data? Because we've been having quite a lot of discussions about NEETs and what's been happening to them or what's not been happening to them. So could you explain that? Because I don't quite get what this is supposed to be telling us.
So I can have a go. So in terms of the not knowns data, so that was data on the system. So it wasn't that the data was incorrect. We didn't have cleaned up where those children were. So they were not known to us. And that part of that is to do with the transfer of the college, once they're registered in a college, they're registered past a census point, which actually is October, and then that data is then transferred onto our system. And because it's two systems, it is a bit glitchy and it overwrites. So I don't think the data you've been presented has been incorrect. The not known data is the numbers of not knowns that we have, but the high level of it historically has been caused by some of the anomalies in the system, which have actually been resolved, because you'll see that the not known data is significantly reduced recently. So whilst our NEAT has gone up slightly, it's because we've found the children that were NEAT, because they previously were not known to us in terms of where they are. So I think that's what that statement means about anomalies in the data.
Right, okay. I wish that when we get this kind of thing that could be explained a bit better, because at the last corporate parenting board meeting I actually asked for a narrative under some wording. So, I mean, when you read things like this, to a simple mind like me, it looks as if there's things that have been going wrong and we haven't found the young people that we're supposed to be looking for. So you've explained that you have, but it doesn't sort of read that way.
Can I, on the forward plan, we have a NEAT report coming to the next board, I think in November. And Dan Ratcliffe, who heads up skills and employability and knows this in a lot more detail, is coming to present that. But you'll have a full picture of all of this data and the detail behind it. So at your next meeting, we can pick up those questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other member? Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, officers, for the report. Chair, I move that the committee notes the new style and content of the report. In addition, I believe we would welcome that additional briefing note suggested by James. I think it will be useful for us to have that, please.
Thank you. Is that agreed? Who seconded it? Oh, Councillor Turpin. Okay, we're now moving on to item 10, the petition, which is going to be introduced by Councillor Johnson. The floor is yours, Clive.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you to everybody for the opportunity to talk this through this evening. I was the lead petitioner, and as with all lead petitioners, if you're unsatisfied with the response of the director, you have the right for it to go to the relevant overview and scrutiny. Can I start with a positive before I get stuck in? Very pleased to see James here tonight, and I'll just point out that the Public Health NHS Health Check team do a really good job in Medway, and I had one of their health checks recently. Obviously, I won't disclose the result of that, but I shall be eating carrots and apples for a very long time, apparently. So well done to them. It was very good. I recommend it. I will be making some recommendations at the end of what I've got to say, and I'll start by saying that the report, as colleagues will be aware, will only includes the signatures for the petition which meet the requirements of the Constitution. But we did run an electronic petition alongside it, and we have an extra 909 signatures to add to the number that's included in the report. So the actual report, albeit not officially accepted by Medway Council, is substantially higher than the one that's included in the report. The background to this item is national inflation running at 10%, with food inflation running much higher than 10%, some basics inflation running at 30%, energy costs through the roof, housing costs rising, 11 million people in the country who are behind on their bills, which is 20% of people, and 45% of people on means-tested benefits are behind on their bills. That's particularly relevant, obviously, to families who are in receipt of free school meals. 5 million people have gone without food in the last week. 8 million people have sold personal items to cover bills, and 15 million people are using credit to pay for essentials. So that's quite a bleak prospect for what we wrap up in the cost of living crisis. And there's nothing for us to assume that this is in any way different for people in Medway. In fact, my experience as a councillor makes me think that this is pretty typical. for people in Medway as well. And in that context, Medway's administration has chosen to end what had been a universal and automatic entitlement and replace it with the Holiday Activities Fund, which does not have enough places for eligible children, and with the provision of a means-tested and bureaucratic application to the Household Support Fund that has not been adequately publicised as a substitute. So, as colleagues will have read in the reports, the Household Support Fund has been identified as an alternative for families in receipt of free school meals. Let me just, so this is from Medway's website. Household Support Fund. To be eligible for support, you must be a Medway resident aged 16 or over, be in apparent hardship, have less than £500 in your bank account, not have access to any funds that can be relied on to meet the need you are applying for, and where you would be left with insufficient resources which would cause serious risks to your own or your family's health or safety. What you will need: your details, name, address, date of birth, contact details, income and expenditure information, along with your latest bank statements for all accounts held in the household. All accounts held in the household. The statements must show transactions of income going in and out, your national insurance number, your household details, including who you live with, a bank statement dated within the last month showing that you have less than £500 in your bank account. This must clearly show your name and the most recent transactions. So we've gone from a system where families in receipt of free school meals received the support, let's just call it for simplicity's sake the vouchers, it hasn't always been the vouchers, let's call it vouchers, has received those vouchers practically automatically for each of the long holidays. And we've replaced it with two things, one of which is you can apply to the Household Support Fund as long as you go through that bureaucratic procedure. The report before us tonight contains a great deal of detail, which I'm not intending to address, though I can do. I want to start with what I think is a very straightforward and simple position. Support for families in receipt of free school meals over school holidays was introduced to recognise the impact of the pressures of the pandemic. Since then, those pressures have worsened considerably. The administration could very easily have continued their support by using the current tranche of household support funding. And a third of that household support funding is identified for the support of families. And it has another discretionary third of that percentage which he could have used. The cohort of children eligible for free school meals is readily identifiable from previous holidays just simply as a list of names. There's no bureaucratic procedure necessary to go through to identify them. They are clearly available. And they are definitely in need. Free school meals is a national measure of hardship. It attracts pupil premium, not just for those who are in receipt of free school meals now, but those who have been in receipt of free school meals at any point in the last 6 years. That's how important a measure it is of hardship. £1,385 for a primary school child, £985 for a secondary school child. It's nonsensical, administratively nonsensical, not to continue this support. It's administratively easy, it is targeted, and it alleviates identified hardship and deprivation. Why would the administration not do that? In collecting signatures, we spoke to many people whose lives and plans were disrupted, people who did not know that vouchers would not be issued for the first time in 2 years and who were panicking about how they would survive the summer. A mother I spoke to eating cereal so her 2 children could eat properly. A family of 5 teenagers relying on money from their grandparents who themselves said that they didn't have much money. This decision had serious real-world consequences for Medway families and the most vulnerable families at that. Looking at some of the detail. Firstly, the council position is that children eligible for free school meals can access the Holiday Activities Fund, which is branded in Medway as Medway Go. We've been very clear over the last year or so this is not about Medway Go, and we support the Holiday Activities Fund, we support Medway Go and the activities, and we look forward to being able to look at the report from Kent University, which is going to evaluate the scheme. So it's not about Medway Go, which is a fine scheme as far as it goes. But Medway Go is no substitute for the Universal Voucher Scheme. There are 11,000 young people eligible for free school meals in Medway, incidentally, up from 6,000 before the pandemic. Now 11,113, as it says in the report. Holiday Activities Fund. So there's nothing like 11,000 places per day on Medway Go, which there would have to be if it was an acceptable substitute. Holiday activities are funded for 4 days for 4 weeks of the summer, not 5 days for 6 weeks. So even in its own terms, it doesn't cover the summer holidays. There are, by design, not enough places on Medway Go for all free school meal eligible children. The places are in proportion to an assumed demand. So it runs at a percentage. And so the system's designed around them not applying for places on HAF. There may be good reasons why they don't apply. There may be inappropriate activities or appropriate activities in a difficult location, children of different ages with different interests. So, you know, that's been flagged up as an issue for families. We've got 2 or 3 children of different ages. There may be transport difficulties, and children may be spending time with other relatives while parents and carers work. The implication seems to be that if families are desperate enough, they'll get there. But the reality is that we're just giving them another set of challenges for families who by definition are disadvantaged, who are under pressure and who are struggling. And we should be helping them, not challenging them. The other alternative for these parents is to apply to the Household Support Fund directly. I've seen no information given to parents or schools that informed them of this option. I've already shown the unnecessary bureaucratic challenge involved in an application. I've asked for information about publicity and about applications, about how many families have benefited and how much money has been dispersed. 774 families eligible for free school meals benefited over the summer. But there are 11,000 children in Medway eligible for free school meals. Let me point out that in the last tranche of household support funding that was given by the government, which ended in April this year, £350,000 of that was returned to the government unused. That's criminal. If the administration can't find enough deprived people in Medway in need of financial support, they simply aren't trying hard enough. Another issue that's come to light, largely following the petition, so it wasn't included in the petition, is the absence of a system-wide publicity and information about the decision. It's my belief that following the decision on the 26th of April, practically no one was told that vouchers would not be issued. Councillors, officers, schools, parents, the whole system was ignorant of the change that was to have such a major impact. I was made aware on the day before the end of term by a parent contacting us. When I raised it at council the next day on the 21st, no member of the administration responded, no cabinet member defended it until mid-August. No mention of the Household Support Fund as a substitute or as a supplement for those families was made until mid-August. When officers were questioned in the summer term about vouchers, they said they would continue. We had an officer at Children's Committee during the summer who very directly said that the voucher system would continue. We had a Labour briefing on the Holiday Activities Fund in which I personally directly asked that question in June, at the end of June, 27th of June. Yeah, the Holiday Activities Fund, that's great, but it's not going to be a substitute for the vouchers. And the response was in the positive, the vouchers would continue. And that's no criticism of those officers, of course, they said, but they simply didn't know otherwise. And that's either a massive failure of government or it displays a shocking disregard for officers and for parents. Just finally, you'll be glad to know, the report says that focuses on Birmingham as a local authority that has done the same as Medway? Well, undoubtedly there are authorities that have done the same as Medway, undoubtedly. The issue is for me, is partly the decision, but also partly nobody knew. You know, it wasn't system-wide. But there are numbers of authorities. We've done our own, not exhaustive research. I'm not claiming this to be exhaustive, but we have done our own research. There are large numbers of authorities and fairly major authorities who have funded vouchers, so it is possible, and those authorities have chosen to do it. So the report says about authorities in England. That's fine. It excludes Scotland and Wales. All local authorities in Scotland and Wales funded vouchers over the summer holiday period for children eligible for free school meals. All local authorities in the whole of Scotland and the whole of Wales. Within England, the following authorities funded vouchers: Kent, Essex, Surrey, Hertfordshire, West Sussex, Portsmouth, Southampton, Slough, Windsor and Maidenhead, Ealing, Newham, Sutton, Havering, Wandsworth, Norfolk, Gloucestershire, Devon, Nottinghamshire, Hull, Newport, sorry, that's a Welsh authority, Newport City in Wales, Hull, Leicestershire. So I'm not claiming that's an exhaustive bit of research, but it does indicate that of the ones that we found, and we weren't looking for the ones that had gone for vouchers, of the ones we found, 58% of them had funded vouchers. So it has been quite widespread over the summer. So I think that's all I'll say at the moment. I'll have the opportunity to sort of round things up a bit later, and I welcome that opportunity. There will be recommendations. So I sent those recommendations to Stephanie earlier today. So they've been circulated. Right. So my understanding is you will have those recommendations. It's just that I wasn't including that, so I didn't know whether they've been sent out, but they have. Yeah, that's fine. The final bit where it says committee recommends, after a conversation with Stephanie, recommends to Cabinet, will say that in future funding, household funding should be used, if there is funding available, it should be used for vouchers. So that's all I want to say for the moment. Appreciate the work that's gone into this from officers. Very much appreciate the work that's gone into it. But it's a really serious issue that had a real impact over the summer, and I really fundamentally believe it was a wrong decision. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Clive. Well, any response?
Thanks, Chair. I'll perhaps start and come back with a few points for members just to consider. I think we all recognise, don't we, that the challenges of the rising costs that we're all facing is something quite significant and unprecedented, and we know the reasons for why. These are global factors that are impacting on our communities. I just wanted to touch on a couple of points, because Councillor Johnson's referenced the rising tide, the credit crunch and that type of thing at this moment in time. And I just want to separate out two things, one around the actual voucher programme and the things that we need to do to deal with the cost of living challenges, because we've got another piece of work that we're currently working with, and that's not just Medway Council, we're linking in at a regional and national level around that type of approach, and perhaps that will come back to this committee in another form in a very short period of time. But just a couple of points, if I might. So one around the actual vouchers in themselves. So what I can do is talk to the work that we've done to support families, and I think in this very hall during the COVID-19 pandemic was evidence of what we did as a system to provide food parcels, voucher schemes, that type of thing, in a very unprecedented period. But actually, we've got the Medway Food Partnership, because one of the issues about vouchers is that they're a one-off, and you mentioned during a holiday period, it's £15 per week, and it just caters for food. And given the challenges that we've currently got around food and the increasing costs of that, I think we need to have more of a sustainable solution, which is what we're doing through the Medway Food Partnership. And I'll bring in my colleague Julia, who can talk a little bit more about what we're doing around the Food Partnership, which gives us more of a sustainable way to approach challenges across Medway for our community, rather than just focuses on one particular period in time, which is a holiday period through schools. Just in terms then of the voucher scheme, on the 5th of May, there was an announcement made through and communicated via our schools network to all schools to advise them that the voucher scheme would not be continuing. And the reasons for that were because, naturally, of the fact that the funding was taken away centrally. So I think that's an important point to note, just in terms of your points around when was this information communicated and to whom. And the reason why that's important is because, clearly, as you mentioned, and we respect 100% the fact that things change and we've got to be dynamic, but the local authority does not have a complete list of every single child on a daily basis that becomes eligible for free school meals. There's a context there, and that's why we work through our schools, because they do get that advice and information up front. But on the 5th of May is when we communicate that. To the points that you made around timing-wise and that information not going out, I just wanted to make that clarification in relation to that particular point. We'd also been on a training programme prior to this, and that was last year, setting out the fact that government were changing the way in which this particular scheme would work. So in the context of all of that, 5th of May was the date when that was communicated out, and quite clearly we need to do better if the information hasn't landed and people weren't aware of all of that. But when we communicate out via the schools, then that is the route where the communication should then get cascaded down, but clearly we need to do more in terms of that route. And this isn't trying to say that schools should have done this or done that. I'm just clarifying the dates when that information was sent out to the system. So hopefully that clarifies that point. I do want to touch on the issue of other local authorities, and actually the challenge that we face as a local authority, as a system, is that we've got to do what's best for our local communities. And I recognise, and in particular, the approach that Councillor Johnson and the petitioners are setting out is one view. But actually, if we just focus on giving people food vouchers at the price of £15 per week, we neglect the fact that there are all the other issues that those families, unfortunately, as you've already referenced, will face. And we've done some quite detailed analysis. My team have done that to identify who's more vulnerable, where we need to actually put our support, and actually the points that you reference around the criteria and the access, I will throw to our finance colleagues, because that's a programme that's been established and that's administered by a different department to mine. But the points that you raise around whether people would have to go through, because you mentioned showing, evidence that they've only got £500 of this, that, whatever else, I think you'll probably find that there was a very much more sympathetic and simple way for people to access support. Because what they then get is not just access to food vouchers, they get access to utility costs being able to be paid for them. For for a household with just 2 people in that, so it could be a single parent and a child, so that's 2 people, they get £70, and that's just not a one-off. They can come back to receiving and apply again for another £70 voucher if they're in dire straits. The challenge again, when you're thinking about a voucher, it would be £90 over a 6-week period. For a household with 3 people in it, it's £105, 4 people £140, 5 people £175, and 6 people you get to £210, and you're not restricted in relation to reapplying if you feel that the need is there. So just on a purely financial basis, those vouchers are available to be used by the family for clothing, for utility costs, and they can apply not just for food. And clearly they can get supermarket vouchers through that particular programme. But that's a very different scheme, and I want to make that clear, to the Medway Go programme. The Medway Go programme is different to the household support grant, but that was the consideration that was taken. So the benefits of doing that means that you actually do tackle some of the challenges that you flagged, and they are live challenges, the real ones that everyone accepts, around families that are struggling to pay for household costs and whatever else. A £15 food voucher compared with the ability to get, 70 up to £210 on more than once, because you can reapply to that, and I'm sure that our finance lead, Dave, will come back and clarify those points, I think is more sustainable and beneficial for our families that are being challenged. couple of the points around capacity and looking to the Medway Go programme in itself. So national programmes around Medway Go, and just to be really clear, the criteria that's set nationally, we at a local level have looked at that and we've used that to base our provision. So nationally, the initial trials said that the uptake for those programmes was between 25 and 35% of those people that were eligible. We went out with our providers and we went for a 35% uptake. So we wanted people to be able to cater for 35% of the needs. Our previous programmes that we've run, I think the highest one, and Julia will tell me whether I'm wrong on this one, was 23%. So we weren't too far off. So even with the increased requirements, and you mentioned the number of people who were then eligible for free school meals, we'd catered what we'd see nationally from other evidence, and this is a national evaluation, but also at a Medway level, we'd said, right, 23%, we're up in 35%. That should give us sufficient capability just on the Medway Go programme. As it turned out, we had 25% uptake through the summer period, and actually, and just so members are clear, our programme was commissioned for the whole 6-week period, and what we were able to then do was to offer every day, so 5 days a week, options for families to go and partake in Medway Go activities. So that's 5 days per week. And I hear what you're saying around the criteria that were set out, but we went further than that, and our providers were able to do that. So we had 5 days a week activity available for Medway residents throughout the 6-week period. In addition to that, there was 32,000 opportunities. So these are 32,000 different actions that people could go in and activities that they could take part in. We had, and I think the uptake was 20,370, something like that, activities. So we had a gap, a deficit, where there was still 11,000 opportunities for people to come forward and take part in activities. The positive thing about that is we had a ceiling, so if anyone wanted to book on late, and I hear you mention the issues about access and being able to cater for people with different needs, every single one of our programs would be able to cater for people with different or challenged needs. All that we needed to have, and this was one of the key points, is that families needed to write in and inform us, so that's an email or telephone conversation, of their particular needs, so that we could then make the service available for them. Clearly, not every single activity would be suitable for every single person, but what we've tried to do, and we can do more of that, is to make sure that the basic requirements were in place and in train. So in terms of the benefits, and this is a distinction, and I do want to keep making this distinction between, and thank you for championing the actual programme, Councillor Johnson. The Medway Go programme is not just about food vouchers. It is about providing people, and that's people in the broader sense, with an opportunity to socially develop, improve their physical and emotional well-being, make connections with people. I've got a list of feedback, and this is qualitative stuff, but this is what people have said. With your indulgence, Chair, I'll just read a few of these points, just to ram home some of the impact of what we've done here. There's a list of them, and these are all different bits from different people. I'll start with this one, actually. This is quite a good one. We are Ukrainians. We both had difficult time, and I'm paraphrasing because this is written, obviously, with somebody whose English is not their first language, but that's why it's verbatim. We are Ukrainians. We both have a difficult time there, meaning in Ukraine. Our hearts are full of fear and pain, but here in this camp, and I'll mention the school. It was a Howard school. My son always gets much attention, warm and positive emotions. He enjoys every day of being there. Thank you very much for the opportunity to visit the free summer camp for him at the Howard school. Everyone is very friendly to him. The trainers, coaches are very attentive, wise and friendly. The food is very tasty. We didn't miss any days, and we're happy to be there. I go further. It was good to see my daughter growing in confidence with every day. It was very comforting to know that she was looked after during her lessons. It was a relief for me not to have to worry about the lunch that day. These are all different people, by the way. With 2 of the children, it gave me the opportunity to spend quality time with them. I have 4 children, so it was great for them to be enjoying something instead of sitting indoors. Taking them out daily costs too much money, and parks are okay, but not every day. During the period that we were running the programme, we had 5 5 safeguarding concerns raised and identified by our programme staff, and they're the people that are working with them. That led to our systems, they worked, interventions were in train, but some of these were quite serious things that were identified because those young people were somewhere else and not in their own homes, and they were taken care of. If it was just a voucher scheme, we would never been able to pick up those opportunities. We wouldn't have been able to support those children, and who would have known what harm would have been caused. Chair, if I can throw to Dave, potentially, just to pick up on the administration of the scheme, because I think that's important just to reaffirm the benefits that we use to lessen the criteria.
Thanks. So in terms of obviously the application process that was in place, it's in place for a reason, and that's to obviously to try and protect that the money goes to the people that do need it. I can take the point that maybe you do see it as an onerous kind of process, but I think actually what it was designed to do was to ensure that the people that needed the funding got the funding. The first tranche for the first 6 months of the grant, as you know, so up to the period up to the end of September, did have grant conditions attached to it, which were around having 33% going to pensioners, 33% going to kind of children, families with children, and 33% to other. So if we had gone down the route of going the full amount of vouchers getting distributed to people, that would have taken up over 50% of that kind of fund in the first place, or around 50% of that fund in the first place. And so there are obviously lots of vulnerable people within Medway who would need support with their bills, who didn't have children, so that we did need to kind of make sure there was some funding earmarked for those kind of people as well. I mean, what we would say is that obviously the household support fund wasn't intended to replicate or replace free school meals. That's in the kind of the guidance that kind of was issued to us. But obviously we did have discretion to use it within kind of the framework. What more do you need to know about in terms of the application process? I'm a bit...
Sorry, Chair, no, I think that's very useful. So that's fine.
Okay. Back.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I don't know how many of this team here, this committee, actually went to see any of the HAF programmes and what was happening. I did. I went to 3 or 4 and I've put my evaluations through to James Williams because I did find some anomalies and things that I wasn't happy with. I hope that they will be taken seriously because one of them I was very concerned about with the young lady who you know about Jumpers Rebound Centre. But I have got some questions that I would like to ask, please. Going on from what Councillor Johnson said about our presentations, I am deeply concerned about the statement that the officer misunderstood the question because Councillor Johnson and others put the question quite clearly about the vouchers. So, in this particular case, this one I'm talking, was she given the wrong information or were they given the wrong information, therefore genuinely thought that the vouchers would be continuing? What action has been taken on the fact that wrong information was given to all councillors at that presentation and in committee? And an apology should be forthcoming to us, if not all parents and carers, about the misinformation, because our campaign has somewhat hinged on this misinformation, as well as Councillor Jarrett's actions. Now, like Councillor Johnson, I spoke to mums and carers and everything when we were getting our petition together, and honestly, members, they did not know that this voucher scheme had finished. It's all very well saying that it was sent out to schools on the 5th of May, but you know what happens within schools. Information is sent, and sometimes, because everybody's busy, it goes in one ear and out the other, or doesn't actively get disseminated out to those who it should be sent to. So there was that part of this information, lack of this information. So all in all, I feel that we have been, although perhaps not intentionally, but we have been somewhat let down by what we heard and what we thought we were going to be able to do. Because if we'd have had the right information in the first place, then perhaps all of this wouldn't have had to have come about. We wouldn't be sitting here with this petition that we've done, although it was very useful to find out what people thought. And it seems as if there needs to be more communication between you guys and the people who are telling us, because if we are given the wrong information, then this is what happens. So it was quite an eye-opener when I actually went to these various programs. And I have to say that the one that I found the most interesting was at Medway Park with the animals. I was greeted by two huge tortoises walking up the corridor when I went in there. And this one was really, really good. It's Mid Kent College. They're hoping to expand their place where I have all the animals. But the children were absolutely enthralled, absolutely. And they really, really loved it. And it was overbooked and they couldn't cater for any more. So animal husbandry and all of that was very, very good. But the other things were not, where people couldn't get booked on and the lead person had to book the young people on because the buttons weren't working and all sorts of things. But I would like some answers to these questions that I've posed, because as I've said, our campaign somewhat hinged on what we were told at the presentations and at committee. Thank you.
I can only, again, I think we've said that in the statement, that if there was a miscommunication, then that's what it would have been. The officers wouldn't have deliberately and overtly gone out there to misrepresent the facts. And I wasn't in the meeting. I've spoken to the officers, and from my perspective, that's a genuine misunderstanding. So on that perspective, you know, there's some guidance that's been given clearly in the future. If there are any further issues that arise like this, the learning is there, and we'll make sure that the communication is more effective. In relation to the points that you raise around the communication, we can always improve, and we've taken that feedback and the issue that's been raised here on board. So, you know, we'll do what we can do clearly to ensure that the messages that around the things that, you know, clearly that are in my direct control go out, and we will make sure that we'll enhance that. I've got to reaffirm, though, central government are the people who reduced the funding and stopped the funding for the voucher scheme. And whilst I know there's some reference to some councils that have already been 50% of all of the upper tier local authorities across England. I can't speak for Scotland or Wales, unfortunately, but I can benchmark us against those that have gone down and done the same thing that we have done in Medway. So on that basis, I do hear what members are saying in relation to that, but I think the context around the vouchers and the focus on that, for me, I think I'd just like to separate out the two things there, because one's within our direct control, and particularly me as an officer. The second bit, which I've referenced, and we'll pick those up in terms of communication and ensuring that there is more of insight from the learning from this, and I've shared that with the team. But in terms of macro policy, unfortunately, that is clearly beyond my direct control, unfortunately.
Can I come back? Can I please just say that, can we therefore please have an apology? Because I think that we were, maybe unintentionally, but as I've said, our campaign somewhat hinged on what we were told. So I think that we, those who were at the presentations, and we need an apology, because it's this has all happened because of that.
So, listen, so I thought I was clear with that. So if my officers have inadvertently, which it appears that from what you're saying, given information out that because they've done that on the basis of their understanding as to what is going on, and quite clearly things change and things don't. But the whole point about vouchers is vouchers were available. So the context around them saying that's a factual comment. So from that perspective, I think what they've done is they've said exactly what they were aware of, and that's what they've said. But if members perceive that that isn't what they understood, then clearly that's an issue, and we've picked that up. But my officers have basically given you the information that they were across and that was factual from their perspective.
Right.
Thank you, Chair. There's two things I'd like to go on to. One of them is that James mentioned that you could contact, so someone with additional needs could contact the programme and specifically say what the needs were and get that support. Now, a lot of our parents weren't aware of that, so you'll find that the Medway Go programme was primarily visited by youngsters who didn't have additional support needs. And if it's as successful, and it does seem as if the Arches local one, which is done at Luton School, was quite successful. They said they could have done with more people, but they didn't have the facilities to cover that. But I would like to see, in relation to parents of youngsters with additional support needs, that extended to include them, maybe with special activities that they need, because James actually said some of or it might have been Clive actually, about some of the activities weren't appropriate. So you need to expand that programme and cover people with additional support needs.
Exactly right, that's what I found.
Thank you. Just to notify you that we did commission certain organisations to deliver special needs for children. For example, Rivermead Inclusive Trust. We have Jimmy's Tennis that specialised in disabilities for children with ADHD, etc. And we had one particular example where a family, where a mother of 3 children had one little boy who was severely ill with a brain tumour and was in a wheelchair, and she needed some respite. So she contacted us as a service, went through the Medway Go website, and the mum was on her knees. Their house had been flooded. She was desperate, so we found provision for all 3 children. The little boy, 5 years of age, went to Rivermead Inclusive Trust, and then the 2 other children went to different alternative services. So we will do everything we can to support those children, and that whilst we have a booking system, there is an email address that we'll more than happily help anybody with, you know, if they're not able to book onto services, which has been the case. We've had lots of no-shows turning up, and we're addressing that. So we will more than happily support any child or any person that needs additional support. We will also recruit more staff, so we work very closely with our providers. We have seen a large increase in number of children with ADHD, etc. And sorry, I just got a bit distracted then. I thought I was being called out. Yes, so we'll do whatever we can to support these children.
Thank you. Gloria, next.
Thank you, Chair. I must obviously acknowledge the part and thank the lead petitioner and the residents that have taken part in bringing this forward. In relation to the presentation that we had from Councillor Johnson, James, you did say that the communication, obviously Councillor Johnson felt that nobody knew about this before the whole thing blew up. But you did respond that the 5th of May was when the communication went on to the school. My question to you is, do you think that this is an acceptable time? Is there enough time for parents to not only get the information, but also to get themselves appropriately prepared for what was to come? And also, and correct me if I'm wrong, Clive, please, in your presentation you made mention that the holiday activity fund, there were not enough places for eligible children. James, I wonder if you can respond to that, please, for me. And also, if you could clarify for me who the group that are eligible for the household support fund, so which group of our residents are in there, because it's not just for the children, I understand. So it would be nice to obviously clarify that. And also, during Councillor Johnson's presentation, he did make mention of about 350 roundabout £1,000 that was returned back to the government. Again, if you could elaborate on that for me, that will be helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Parris. So in terms of communication, I think we're here, and I hear what members are saying. We can always improve in terms of doing that, and that's the learning for me in relation to that. There are lots of different channels. You normally, because you've got to get the information out to a specific cohort. As I mentioned before, I don't have a list. It's not my department, to be fair. But the context of new families, even we mentioned last year, I think Councillor Johnson said 6,000 to 11,000. Even within the year, we'll have had more families become eligible for free school meals. So I don't have that list. So we rely on our systems and processes to get that information out. Clearly, it's not been as effective as we want it to be. We've looked at that and we will improve in the future. There's nothing else, but you know, that is what needs to happen, and that is what will happen. In terms of capacity, I think I've already said we had more than enough capacity to deal with the children who were eligible to come forward. We're evaluating that now. I think the data in the report that we've currently got now says 2,873 children have come forward, and that's individual children as opposed to different children coming more than once. That's 25% of the eligible cohort. So in that respect, we've hit, you know, the national average, which was what was benched out between 25 and 35%. I think there's some really good points being made by members around actually how do we actually reach further into our communities and give them more of an insight as to the supports that are available. That is a clear point. We need to take that away, and I have done, in order to build on that and make sure that we get the consultation right. And members in this room have got a very pivotal role in helping to secure that. In terms of the eligibility criteria, that is actually beyond my ken, so that goes into the government criteria about who's eligible for the household support fund, and that's something set. And I think it's down to benefits eligibility, but that would be our finance colleagues who would be able to give you a bit more of a steer on that one. But the points that you make around communication wasn't as effective. Clearly it wasn't as it needs to be. We need to fix that. We're working through that, and we'll make sure that that gets done. And the points around access and making sure that we take the learning from the petition, because it is, you know, it's all valuable and informative. We will use that information to improve the way in which we do things as we move forward. Eligibility criteria, I'm going to hand over to finance.
I'm not a benefits person, so you have to bear with me a little bit on some of these kind of responses. Certainly, I mean, the first tranche that we got, so the 2.2 million that covers the last 6 months of the previous financial year, which was the portion that we did give back the £350,000 for, it is regrettable. Nobody wants to give back money back that's come in. But obviously, we had a process in place, and the applications, for whatever reason, didn't come through in the volumes that we had expected for how we'd planned to spend that grant. Certainly, the funding we've received for the 6th period that's runs up till tomorrow, we are projecting and quite confident that we will spend the vast majority. We can't guarantee we'll spend every penny of it, because it's obviously these things are demand-led, so it depends how many claims have come in. But we are much nearer to kind of making sure that all that full allocation has been passed out to the people who need that kind of the funding. And not just through kind of allocations to individuals, but allocations to various VCS groups as well, to kind of help out, so food banks and some of the like around Medway.
Thank you. Can I come back, Chair, please? Chair, whilst obviously I can see there are lessons to be learned, especially with regards to communicating these matters to the relevant parties way beforehand, so that at least everyone knows how to plan. I recognize that we, as a local authority, we had to do what we have to do to secure our residents and to provide the best service for our residents. I do, however, feel that it is important for grants never, no matter how small, never to be returned. I think it may be necessary for proper planning to be done, especially if we have surpluses. Where do we then use those surpluses rather than send them back to the government? I don't think that's a good way of actually using funds that we need, and we haven't obviously adequately planned for that. It's also important, what I wanted to know was not so much the eligibility, but which group of people, because we talk about 2.2 million, and suddenly some people may think that that 2.2 million was just for children. It wasn't, was it? No, so that's also, again, just to reiterate what I'm trying to say is the fact that we have utilized the funds that we have to provide these holiday activity funds for our young people, for our families. It's encouraging to see so many children participating, and even the case of that 5 cases of children with needs coming through, because without those activities, there was no way we could have actually been able to identify those safeguarding needs. So I think that's on its own is a huge success from that. However, officers, I think we could do better. Learn the lessons and be open, really elaborate when you're communicating, because people don't know. You have to be able to tell them well in advance, break it down so that they understand. And this idea of people thinking we've had 2.2 million, it's not just for children's services, it's for even the elderly, am I right, within that money, that fund, right?
Yeah, I mean, the various tranches of funding we've had have all had different conditions attached to them. So I think that if you think back to the initial one, I think that was something like 80% on kind of people, children, families with children, at least 80%, and then at least 80% that you had to had some kind of housing element in it. The second one was 33% for kind of pensioners, 33% for families with children, and 33% for others. The new tranche we've got just now, we've only just received draft guidance in the past week, changes that again, so that may well remove the pensioner element of that. So there may be a different kind of makeup of how we kind of use the funding going forward, but that obviously needs to be agreed by kind of senior colleagues within the council. And the point about not wanting to pay money back, of course, no, nobody does, do they? But there's a balance between making sure you get all the money out of the door and making sure that money lasts for the duration of the scheme. Because if you spend all £2 million in the first like month or 2 months, then you've got another 4 months period where people aren't going to get support. So there is a balancing act, and that's the nature of it being demand-led. That actually you can't guarantee you spend every penny of it. That's the nature of it.
Let's just not send that.
Tristan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to come back on 3 things. So first of all, it's very clear that I think from the criteria that is required to get the support, and it was indicated that, well, actually there's some flexibility in that, which kind of makes a mockery then of your numerous hoops that people have to go for, the bank statements, which, by the way, you can't get hold of a bank statement unless you print it off a printer, because most banks don't have somewhere to go you can pick them up from. So in my view, you have created hurdles. We know there's a cost of living crisis. We know more and more people are going into poverty. That is a statistical reality. And you have to ask yourself, well, the reason why your demand isn't going up is possibly because you've created hurdles which have stopped people accessing that. And that has to be a genuine reflection on, if you're giving money back to the government and yet we've got an increase in poverty, which we do, then you're doing something wrong. That to me is a basic, and I think someone should have reflected on that earlier. On this Go campaign, look, we have more than 6 weeks of holidays a year at school. We have half-term holidays, we have Christmas holidays, we have 11,000 kids that need free school meals. This Go programme, in a year where the council was flush with cash, We have where poverty is not a problem, when we don't have issues with a rising population that require free schools meals. Yeah, I'm happy. It's a success, no doubt, for that situation. But we are now in a completely different environment, and we are funding through this programme buildings, people, probably paying the council to book a room somewhere in a sports centre, and yet for 700 people that's fine. But we've got another 9,200 people we're not catering for, and I think it comes down to a simple decision. Do you give 11,000 people who need free school meals food, or do you fund an activities workshop for a minority of those people? And I think what we're saying here is, quite frankly, we just wouldn't have made the same decision as the one that this council would have made. And I think going forward, that needs to be reflected upon. You know, we can go back and forth on the numbers and whether someone liked it or didn't like it. But the reality is if we've got 11,000 kids without food for X weeks a year, and it isn't just the summer holidays, versus running a camp for 4 weeks or having Medway Sports Centre open up for turtles or whatever, you've got to ask what the priority is here. And that reality is, to me, as someone, the priority is getting the food to the most people that need it and the families that need it at a time when we've got a cost of living crisis. And that is how the council helps people the most. Not high-profile advertising, not websites which have tortoises crawling across the floor or whatever. That, to me, I'll be candid, when the council's got no money or a lack of money, it doesn't smell right. So, and I just want maybe a reflection on this fact that if looking forward now, that next year we look at this perhaps budget again and we say, actually, perhaps we need to change our thoughts given the cost of living context, and maybe go back to what other local authorities have done around the country, which is perfectly deliverable, which is that they focus the resources into free school meals for vouchers for every child that needs it across the entire year and not just the summer months. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chair. And just to really clarify, these are two separate programmes, members. You can apply, as we've heard, through the process to get half funding, and in addition, you can attend the Medway Go programme, because they're two different schemes. One's funded by the Department for Education, that's Medway Go, and the other one's funded by the Department for Work and Pensions, and there are no restrictions that I'm aware of that prevent people from accessing both of those services. So I don't think it's as black and white in that kind of context as you can only have one or the other. Actually, what we're trying to do and what I can see, and I think it's a really good debate, because we've gone from a position of just focusing on one particular element, which is the food vouchers, to that broader debate that we do need to have around how do we actually work as a system to sustain and facilitate those families and those communities that are more challenged going into the future. So I just want to make that clear. I don't think it's as straightforward as one or the other. Actually, we need to do that. But the Medway Go programme is not just about turtles, as I mentioned. I think, you know, the context for us is we've had some significant benefits of running that programme with the engagement of the families. The evaluation, from my perspective, is very positive, but there is always learning, and we've heard learning already this afternoon, and we will take that definitely on board. So I'm not saying that these things are perfect, because they are not, but what I will just suggest is that we need to look at lots of different ways in which we can support our community and not just simply focus on food. And if I might, Chair, I just want to throw to Julie just to talk about the Medway Food Programme, just very succinctly, because I think it's important to recognise what we are doing and what we have been doing, not just through the summer months or through a holiday period, but a sustained programme over time. I know members probably want to curtail this debate, but I do think it would be helpful just to get a little bit of insight into the Medway Food Partnership.
Thank you, James. I absolutely agree with what Councillor Johnson says. You know, we've got cost of living crisis, we've got children and families going hungry. We've also got a huge obesity crisis as well. So under the whole systems obesity approach, we have 3 subgroups. One is physical activity, the other is food partnership, and the other is infant feeding. So the aims of the food partnership is to The vision of it is to create an environment that supports sustainable access of healthy food, skills and education for all. So building healthy communities and better futures for everyone. So within that food partnership, we have 5 subgroups. Subgroup 1 focuses on poverty, food security and emergency food, which means working with a lot of our charities, working with our businesses, local businesses. The other one is the healthy food and education and skills, because as you're probably all aware, many families still don't know how to cook. We've had children come into the HAF programme saying that they're only allowed to eat burger and chips. And then when they were offered pasta bolognese, they said, I'm not allowed to eat that, I don't know what that is. So, and when they did eat it, after 3 bowlfuls later, they were saying, can you teach mum how to make this at home? Another important aspect, subgroup 3, is climate change and the environment. We have huge amounts of food waste, so we're working very closely with our food providers and partners to reduce the amount of food waste. We're also working with lots of businesses and organisations around change and how they procure services around waste, etc. And the other is oral health. We have a huge problem with children and admissions to hospital around oral health. So in a bit of a nutshell, the food partnership is tackling those other aspects, as Councillor Johnson rightly highlighted.
Thank you. Anybody else? You will come back, Joe, do you?
Sorry, am I on your list to speak?
Yes, you are.
Oh, thank you. Is it my turn? Oh, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Sorry for that. I just a bit incredulous about why so many people, and I'm talking loads of people in my constituency in Chatham, loads of people in Gillingham, people at the school gate in Who, did not know that these vouchers were not going to be receiving those vouchers. So we've talked about miscommunication. Free school meals came into existence in 1906 to make sure that children had food, but also, you know, that they had, you know, could grow, they could brain develop and everything else. And, you know, if Scotland can do it and Wales can do it, then we should be able to do it in Medway. The Household Support Fund, you know, I live in the most, I'm elected for one of the most deprived wards in Medway. I had people in tears talking to me because they'd saved money for school uniform and had just gone over that £500. They saved money for 3 days in a caravan and had gone over that £500, so couldn't get any money. And I just think you need to think about things like that. People that, you know, one woman had walked all the way to work for 3 months to get 3 days in a caravan with her 4 children, and so therefore she couldn't access this household support fund. You know, so communication is key, but if others can do it, I'm sure Medway can. And finally, I went to loads of the have things, and I could see lots of hidden disabilities in children, but actually complex needs children, deaf children, blind children, no, they weren't there. And actually families weren't there because they had to be at different places, and that was impossible.
Okay. Okay, anybody else? Yes. Yeah.
Just a quick question. Obviously, respond with regards to the first part of Joe's comment about the mother who's walked around to get to a caravan or something like that. What can we do to help somebody like that? You know, do we just look at them and say, is there help? And if there is there a way as councillors, you know, for us to be able to refer them to that help, please?
So, members, so I don't administer the Household Support Fund. It's not within my direct remit, so really I can't respond in relation to the comments that have been raised in relation to eligibility. But what I would say is, I think we've been really clear. The Medway Go bit, which I can talk to, will flex. We will try to get more providers because it's about the eligibility. And if people are being presented, and I would really like to have a conversation actually after this meeting around your experiences, Councillor, in terms of those families, because if you've got some insight as to what we can do to help improve and create more of an environment through the way in which we procure that service next year, then we'll do that. We will make the changes as best as we can to cater for the needs of our population. But in terms of the eligibility criteria, that is obviously a question that I can't answer, unfortunately.
Just obviously important to know that, well, they might not meet this criteria, but there is still help available for people like that, is what I'm saying.
It seems to me that, I mean, I hate with a passion the term lessons have been learned, but there is, in this particular case, lessons can be learned, and I do hope that you guys take on board what has been said and make sure that, next year it's going to be better. But, okay. Vice Chair. Yes.
Yeah,
okay.
Sorry, Chair, I think it's back to me. Right, can I thank everybody for their contributions, particularly James, who's had to respond on a number of occasions. This isn't about the Holiday Activities Fund. So it's not about Medway Go. It's about the decision not to fund the vouchers. Now, that's brought into it because one of the reasons the administration says they chose not to fund the vouchers was because Medway Go was available. But this petition is about the decision not to fund the vouchers. Let's be very clear about that. That was a political choice. They could have chosen to fund vouchers. They chose not to. So let's just look at that decision from the perspective of families who for 2 years have had support during holidays for free school meals. Those children eligible for free school meals have had that support during those holidays. And they find, just before the beginning of that holiday, that they're not going to get that support. Because I'm not aware of anybody that knew. I'm not aware of counsellors that knew, let alone parents. There may well have been a briefing to schools on the 5th of May, but the implications that vouchers weren't going to be funded was clearly not made available to the system as a whole, because I can tell you on the 6th of May, people would have been starting to talk about it. We certainly would have been starting to talk about it. We didn't have the opportunity to start talking about it until the end of term because nobody knew. Those officers who briefed us during the summer, no criticism of them, they didn't know. There wasn't any misunderstanding about it. They didn't know. The whole system didn't know. I've seen the briefing that's attached to Headway, which is the magazine for the newsletter for school staff, in which supposedly mention was made of the vouchers not being available. There was one bullet point in a whole presentation that says this is different to the voucher scheme. Now, I don't know how that was fleshed out during the briefing. I wasn't there, but I've just seen the slides. If that's any indication of how clear it wasn't clear. So that decision was very much a political choice, and that's fine. That's what we're here for, as officers and particularly as politicians, to make those political choices. But we have to be held to account for those choices, and that's what this petition does. A lot of what has been said by officers, particularly by James, I would absolutely agree with. The benefits of the HAF scheme, the Medway Go, the food partnership, sustainable approach to supporting families who are in poverty. Much of what he said I've got no disagreement with at all. That's no reason why we shouldn't have been funding those free school meal vouchers for those eligible children over the summer holidays. There's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't be doing that. David's point about the funding, I accept that. It was not going to be a cheap option, but it was well within the current tranche of HSF funding. We could have made that choice. The administration could have made that choice. The HSF could have supported it. And on the basis of the previous tranche, there would have been plenty of room in order to be able to do that. I take David's point about this current tranche being used. The point about, I mean, we need to be very clear about the availability of places on Medway Go. So I say it's not about Medway Go, only in the sense that it's a substitute for, or it's it's an alternative to the vouchers. We have 11,000 children in Medway eligible for free school meals. My calculation, 5 days a week for 6 weeks, that's 330,000 places that we would have needed. And James says we had 32,000 places. And that's right, that's absolutely fine. That Holiday Activities Fund is funded by a separate stream for the Household Support Fund. It has its own criteria. That's been done very successfully. I'm hoping we as a committee will be able to look at that at some point. But there's absolutely no way, even if all the other circumstances were in place about suitable activities, transport, additional needs, all of those, even if they were in place, there is only something like 10% of the places for the number of slots that would have been needed if young people eligible for free school meals were going to go on the Medway Go programme. So it's just simply not the number of places available. Absolutely accept the Medway Go is not just about food, it's about social development. Yeah, absolutely. All of that. I think it's important, though, to be a little bit careful that we're not demonising poor people. I hear lots about how poor people can't budget, poor people can't cook. I hear a lot about that. In my experience, and I come from a working class family, working class people are very good at budgeting because they have to be. They're very good at stretching their resources because they have to be. Clearly, that's not going to be everybody, but that's my experience as somebody who comes from a working class background and still has working class relatives. They are very careful with their money. There's always room for all of us to improve, so I'm not saying that element of Medway Go is not needed. It is, but we do need to be very careful. What poor people need is money. What homeless people need is housing. What hungry people need is food. And we could have done that during the summer. We could have done that, and we chose not to. The administration chose not to. That's the key element in this petition. That's the key element behind this issue. It's not to do with Medway Go and how brilliant that was. It was very good. It's about we could have chosen to fund vouchers, we chose not to, and what the damage for that has been over the summer. So, all right, okay. So, the Holiday Activities Fund, Household Support Fund, different strands. In this discussion, they've been linked. That's absolutely fine. But we do need to be very clear about what we're saying. So, I'm intending, I hadn't prejudged the discussion, but I did prepare the recommendations in advance. I was happy to change them if the discussion meant that I should change them. As things stand, I don't think my view has changed. So my intention is to recommend the recommendation that is in the email that you've received that starts, committee notes the decision taken by the leader under urgency provisions and ends with available during the holiday periods. So there's two elements to it. I won't read it all through because you've read it. There's two elements to it from my point of view. One is the original decision was wrong and should have been taken differently. And secondly, the issue that's come out about publicity, and then finally recommends that if future funding is provided, and the way the economy is going, there won't be Household Support Fund or Holiday Activities Fund in a year's time, is my guess. But where future funding is provided, that free school meal provision should be available during the holiday periods. So I've not heard anything that makes me think I want to change any of those. So I'm formally proposing those. I won't read them through because everybody's seen them. I'm formally proposing those as recommendations as a result of this item.
Yeah. So that's significantly different to the original recommendation, is it? Because the recommendation was that you would move the committee to note the new style and contents of the report. So you're changing that significantly.
Oh, sorry.
That was from the report. And
Yes, I guess I am.
Sorry.
yeah,
I beg your pardon. Yeah, I move that the committee notes the referral request in paragraph 3 and the Director of Public Health's response.
Yeah, I mean, that can stay, I guess.
That's what is.
Yes, so this is supplementary to that.
Is he allowed to do that?
Does that work? I think that works, doesn't it? Because, you know...
It's for you to propose it, you need a seconder,
Yeah.
and then you can vote.
Right, okay. Can you read that out again, please?
It's
Your recommendation. An email, right. Let me get the email up. But does everybody else have the email? I know it came in, but did everybody read it? That's what I asked. It may have been a bit too late for some of them. Hang on, where's my emails?
Yeah,
What time did it come out? Yeah. Could I ask one question? If all else being equal, and the land was full of flowing with milk and honey, what would the cost be to provide the free school meals as you've suggested? Is anybody able to answer that?
I think it's about $1 million.
You're saying it. I understood you said it'd be 11,000 children.
I did a rough calculation. I thought it was $1 million at £15 a week.
When we did it earlier, it's about 1.1, yeah.
1.1 million.
Approximately.
That's half of the
11,000 at 7 weeks holidays a year, £15 per pupil.
So that would have cost somebody.
Sorry, how many weeks?
7.
Why 7?
Because that's not just across the. I might be getting confused. That might be outside of the half thing.
Right, I'm just talking about the 6-week summer holiday period.
If it was 6 weeks, it'd be lower than 1.1 a minute. It'd be about $1 million. So let's call it around $1 million for the sake of
That's what I made it, $1 million.
What I'd like to know is the cost of providing school meals for all the holidays, which is what you're asking for.
No, I'm talking about the 6-week summer holiday period.
6-week summer holidays.
£1 million.
£1 million, which is half of the SFF funding. Yeah, we've got 2.26 million, I believe. Is that right? So that's going to be more than half. If you're saying it's £1 million, okay, so it's pretty well half of it. It's certainly more than a third. Yeah. So if this money you said earlier was ring fenced.
No, so obviously we can't undo what's done because that's done.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about is the next. Well, what you're thinking, Jonathan, is if it continues, funding continues for the next financial year.
Yeah.
The funding is put aside for the 6 weeks of the summer holidays for free school meals vouchers.
Yes, but obviously we're a scrutiny committee, so we can only recommend. So the cabinet would be free to ignore it.
This is the end of the road. I can't accept that the administration was wrong in what they decided, because of the financial implications. So I couldn't accept that part of it. Funding for the school meals would have been easily administered. Fine. Funding for... So where did he say? Where did you say in your recommendations that the administration was wrong? Because I can't see it at the moment.
26th of April, and concludes that the decision not to fund vouchers for children eligible for free school meals over the summer holiday period should not have been taken, and that funding for free school meals should have been made available. First line.
I can't see it. It's not on my list. Have you changed it since then?
It's the very first line.
First line?
Committee, yeah.
Committee notes taken by the leader.
No.
Yeah, there it is.
I would be happier if that was taken out.
That would be the bit, what you're suggesting is committee notes down to the end of the 4th bullet point, free school meals on Medway Go. So you wouldn't be able to support all of that first, let's call it paragraph.
What do you think?
Because, I mean, the bullet points are just explanations of...
I agree, Chair, that there are lessons to be learned, but I do feel that as a local authority, we did the right thing and we made available the right services for our families during the holidays. So the use of urgency powers there, I think, was appropriate, I would say.
You would? Sorry?
I would say that the use of urgency powers was appropriate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So... I don't think we did the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You agree with me? Yeah. Thank you. Would you be happy to take out that first paragraph? You wouldn't?
No.
In which case we need to vote on it.
I'm proposing the recommendations as they stand.
Okay. All those in favour? All those against?
5.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, we'd like recorded votes. So I think technically we have to ask for them individually, but I think we all do.
Can we have a
yeah, so our vote's recorded. Thanks.
Start with Councillor Johnson.
Pardon?
Sorry, say that.
We'd all like our vote recorded on this side. But I think technically we have to ask for it individually, but I think in the past that's just been accepted.
Yeah, I can record an individual vote for every member on that side.
Can you put your microphone on? Can you speak?
I do think it would be, I mean, I will obviously agree with what the majority of us are saying, but And I do think that we should put in there that we do think mistakes have been made, because we wouldn't want these sort of things to happen again.
Which is what I was trying to do. Which is what I was trying to do.
Sorry.
This is what I was trying to do. Yeah. Item 10, over to you, Pip.
Sorry, Chair. Do you want me to then go back to the recommendation, original recommendation?
Yes, okay.
Okay. I move that the committee notes the referral request in paragraph 3 and the Director of Public Health's response. Obviously, it will be nice to add that errors have been made and lessons should be learnt.
Is that agreed? All of those in favour? Against?
I just wondered if we could clarify what areas you think they are.
We're on paragraph 3.
Can I say something? I think errors on my part is the fact that the 5th of May may not have been long enough notice for parents to get themselves prepared for what was to come. On my part, anyway, I feel.
To interfere, but surely we should have made sure that the public were aware of what was going on, rather than people just not understanding that they were no longer going to get vouchers, because that isn't helpful to people. If we put our plans to people, what we're going to do, and I think that James has got excellent ideas, and I think that that is the way forward. But I do think we have a duty to let the people know what our plans are before we put them in place.
Yes, we've got to be transparent, more transparent, and I think that message has got to cross to officers. Would you not agree? Yeah? Yeah.
It's not my area.
I know, but yeah, so, I mean, obviously there's got to be more transparency. Maybe it should go into Medway Matters or something like that in words of one syllable that everybody can understand. Maybe the criteria could be simplified. I don't know, there's lots of things, but I mean, the message has got to officers.
Absolutely, and going out and speaking to charities before we make decisions, like going out to speak to charities, you know, children's charities and things like that, because they're usually so very helpful.
I'm sure they will come up with something,
We'll
Wendy.
come up with something on the basis of this discussion tonight. Communication is a lesson learned. We will come up with something. Yep.
Okay, moving on. Right. Work programme.
I don't have anything to add, Chair, but I'm happy to take any questions that anybody has.
Yes, Pat.
Yes, the officer mentioned about the post-16 review. Are we going to have sight of that on the work programme, post-16 review?
Yeah, we can do. We're expecting completion January to February time, this starting next month.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Programme that.
Yeah, we'll programme that in. Anybody else? Okay. Vice Chair. Is that agreed? Okay, thank you very much. So that's the end of the meeting. Thank you very much. Joe, if I can have a quick word before you go. Thank you.